Hey there, and welcome to episode number 79 of Killer POV. We've made it to 79.
10 degrees less sexy. And you know what was really weird? Elric just did air drums during the opening. I've never seen
There's
this happen
nothing weird about
before.
that. It's a great piece of music, and he should be
That
playing.
said, though,
no.
I'm going to challenge
playing.
Rob. I want you to top this piece of music that when you come back from New York, I want you to have an original new piece of music. A new original opening for us.
Something that blows me away.
You're actually opening up as part of some of the things I needed to plug right at the beginning of the show.
Musical can of worms.
First of all, I'm Rob G from Icons of Fright, formerly FEARnet.
I feel like we've been talking for hours.
It feels like that, doesn't it?
I just spend my whole day with you people.
Elric Kane from Inside Horror, a.k.a. the Jump Cut Cafe manager that's never there.
Yeah, pretty much.
Rebekah McKendry from Fangoria magazine.
Hello.
And the two areas of pimpage that I'd like to get right out of the way. One, as Elric mentioned, I announced today, we're going to take a very brief hiatus in November, and that is because I am going back to New York to reunite with some of my old bandmates, a band called The Great Below, and I'm looking forward to it. So just a brief break from horror to do some music. But if you're at all interested, just check my Twitter and Facebook and stuff I've posted to the page.
And during that time,
I will be. And we're actually, thank you for reminding me.
Yes.
Not only am I getting back together.
Because we've got New York fans who might want to go see you play.
That's right. I'm playing November 7th at a venue in Limbrook, New York. I'll be tweeting about it because I don't know where it is. I just know it's close to where I used to live on Long Island. And we're trying to book a show in the city as well, because I have a lot of friends in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. So if all goes well, I'll play a couple of gigs over in New York, and maybe I'll see some of our listeners there or some old friends, and that'd be kind of neat.
We're going to have to do something equally epic while he's gone.
I think we could start a band.
I
own a banjo. I've never played it.
I own a banjo too.
Oh my God. We could be a bluegrass sensation.
I encourage this. Go for it. You guys should make a record. You guys make your record. I'll make mine, and we'll see what we come up with.
Which one? Yeah, okay. Whoever comes up with the best opening theme song will be the new. I think from episode
everyone
85.
loves really bad banjo, because I have a feeling we could do this.
We promised that we would do this briefer because we have been here for a while. So we're going to dive right back into it.
Yes. Okay. So what has everyone seen so far? Anyone want to go first? I only have a few titles.
I did less this week than the previous week. I'll start. I never start. I'm going to, because this one, Jared Rivet, your old teammate and good friend, he had a film that I tried to rent and it didn't work when I brought it home, called Eyes of a Stranger. Ken Wiederhorn, and I'm a big fan of Shockwaves.
I own that on VHS. Why don't you just come over to my house?
I did not know you had this.
It on VHS.
Tom Savini effects. Ken Wiederhorn, who, I don't know if he's a good director or not. When I watch Shockwaves, I like Shockwaves, but I can never tell if it's well made. This film's really good, and this is a slasher film that is, far less known. It's the first performance of Jennifer Jason Leigh, as far as I know, playing a traumatized girl, and her sister's the lead, not her. It's a very, what I really like? It's a pretty straight slasher film, a little bit of Rear Window in it, but the actual kills are really good. But what's really, because Savini's doing the effects, but what's really great is the killer, and it reminds me of Maniac a little bit without the lead protagonist. The killer is just so banal, and the way he looks is who really would be a killer, like the kind of guy in your apartment building who's a little schlebby, and they're just saying off, and which was really refreshing, and they never kind of sensationalize it. So I think if you feel like you've seen all the slasher films, and you always crave a new slasher, Eyes of a Stranger is a really good pick. It looked like it was set in Florida as well, like Shockwaves. I really enjoyed it. And I saw Gone Girl, which is a David Fincher film. I won't spend too much time, but it's definitely mystery thriller and has one of the most horror images of the whole year. That's all I'll say.
Wow.
Many twists, and this film has many tones, so it's a very hard film to pin down, but definitely fun. I wanted to mention quickly Walking Dead, the first episode of the new season. I know you guys aren't up to date. The first episode of the new season, Greg Nicotero directed it. It's the best episode of the entire
I've heard
Walking Dead, and it did exactly what I think happened is the showrunner who took over last, Scott Gimple, was still tied to a lot of previous storylines last season and was just trying to kind of get out of that so he could really go for it now. And this episode, if this is where the show's going, it's going to be a lot of fun because they just go for it. It's it felt like what you would build 5 or 6 episodes on. They just did in the first episode, like, all right, let's just get on and let's just do it. And the bloodletting is insane. And so that was really entertaining, and I'm really happy to see that show kind of maybe get to what it's meant to be. And then last and not least, I'm not going to go into this too much because of the politics surrounding it. And a lot of people outside of LA might not care at all, and for that reason. But I did see Out of Print, which is a documentary about a favorite movie theater of all of ours called the New Beverly, which Quentin Tarantino is now running. This film was made before all of that, all the drama unfolded, and it's an interesting film about a place and love of cinema. And for that reason, and it's free and it's online right now. For that reason, I would say, if you're interested in cinema or the New Beverly, of course, watch it if you know the New Beverly. It's not flawless, and there's a lot of talking heads, so there's other elements that I don't necessarily gel with, but I found it kind of bummed me out. While something still exists, you felt like it was slipping through your hands like, sand, and it had that kind of feel about cinema and 35 in general. But yeah, I would encourage, though, even though we're not going to get political on the show about this topic, I would really encourage people who are interested in movies to read all these conflicting articles that are being written about this right now, because it's really interesting. It's interesting to and at its core, if you're not related to these people, why it's interesting is because it actually proves that we give a shit about cinema.
Yeah.
Because if all these people and all these major magazines are writing, some of them are just writing because Tarantino's name's involved, but ultimately it's really because people really have a connection to movies and places that are very rare and dying, like the New Beverly. There's really no place like the New Beverly. And I think that's a great sign that we care enough to, have an opinion. So anyway,
but,
it's
much like anything that draws drama, because I don't want to personally comment, but I'll say, obviously, certain people tied with certain people involved will skew their articles or stories a certain way, which is just the way news works in general. So if you do research the material, read it all and know that that's not all the truth, but somewhere within all that lies some of the truth.
Yeah, and you're dealing with very complicated situations, like where some guy, there are some facts, like Tarantino saved that theater.
Like it was about to close down, and he saved it.
It would be, I think, what did they say? It was going to be a Subway and a...
Supercuts, yeah.
So that's non-negotiable. Now,
that's a fact.
That said, there's some ugly things along the way, but that should be remembered, and I think... but I don't want to get too much more into it than that, but it's amazing. I think in the modern world, to keep businesses like that going, and I include Jump Cut in that, you almost need people like that to have deep enough pockets so they don't care if they're losing money. And that might be the only way businesses like that really can go on. Because
Tarantino, if you're listening, please buy the building that the Jump Cut is in.
Okay, Tarantino. Take me over, Quentin. That's what I said. Take me over. All right. Anyway, and I haven't seen a lot other than that, but Eyes of a Stranger, I highly recommend.
Nice.
Cool.
I went back and watched Dead Silence.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Just because I hadn't seen it since it first came out. And when it first came out, I actually remembered really, really liking it. But it got so kind of critically panned then that I was like, what did I see? I guess I, kind of watched it stupid or something. But I went back and I still like it just as much as I did back then.
Yeah.
So, I still think it's a fun film. It's got some really good jump scares. It's by no means flawless. There's some parts of it that are kind of campy, but I still think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I've been meaning to revisit that. I haven't seen it in a long time either, and I just like that one a lot. So
you know what I didn't like about it?
Fuck,
I don't know what she's talking about. I didn't like Ryan Kawant. I just wrote "Why do you suck" on her book.
He stole my notebook, wrote "Why do you suck," and then passed it back to me.
And it's a rhetorical question. So feel money to respond. No, I never felt good about Ryan Kwanten in that role, and I think that was my problem with the movie, even when I first saw it, because I think a lot of the other stuff's really creepy. I just don't. For some reason, I don't connect to him as a leading man. I watched True Blood and just. There's, sometimes that's the thing about acting. It's complete, roles.
I gotta say, having seen it right after Saw was so gritty and visceral and just icky. And this is really shiny.
It's very gothic looking. Yeah, I love that about it.
And so I think that might have been where my taste kind of was confused back then. Because
isn't Annabelle like the same one? Annabelle be basically the same movie?
It's Mary Shaw, the ventriloquist dummy, but there's a lot more to it. Okay. I got to revisit it. I will say this. It's funny because what's the article you posted today about watching from Fangoria, watching movies in black and white?
Oh, yeah. They did the battery.
Shadow Zone? Is that what it's called?
Shadow Vision?
Mm-hmm.
Shadow Vision.
By Ken Hanley, one of our listeners. And I really like that article that he writes.
Good job, Ken.
Ken, actually, a recommendation for Ken. My buddy Mike C., who I did Icons of Fright with, he recently revisited Dead Silence, and he didn't like it when it first came out, or I don't think he did. Or he thought it was too, I don't know, whatever it was going for was that weird, like, Hammer Gothic thing.
Yeah.
But he texted me randomly one night saying, "Hey, I rewatched Dead Silence and I turned the color off, and it actually works so beautifully as a black and white movie."
That makes total sense to me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because it'll feel like the anthology Dead of Night.
1945 Dead of Night. Yeah.
Exactly. So Ken, if
I
you're
might
looking
do
for
that.
one, maybe Dead Silence
That's a good idea.
black and white one.
Ken, this isn't an option. Ken, your
you
next
have to-
article
No,
has just been greenlit.
We're counting on you.
Plug Killer POV
Yeah,
when
exactly.
you do it.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Dead Silence, what else?
So I watched Dead Silence. I watched, this one's kind of a weird one for me because usually I will like or I won't like a film. I'll rewatch it and then I like it. In this instance, I liked it. I rewatched it and I don't like it.
Ooh.
And this is The Scribbler.
Oh, okay.
Which I saw at AFM last year, which is coming up, by the way, in 2 weeks. So I'll have a lot when we come back in November. I'll have a lot to report on that I saw at AFM. But last year at AFM, I saw The Scribbler. And when I saw it there, I really liked it. And I rewatched it on Amazon this week and thought it was the most trite movie I've seen in a really long time. So
now, have they changed it a lot since
I don't think so. I don't think they changed it at all, which is why it's most perplexing for me.
How do you think you've changed, Rebekah?
I don't know. So I was
That's
hoping.
the question. Yeah.
I was hoping that one of you guys had seen this, or that one of our listeners had seen it, so I had somebody to discuss it with. Because not a lot of people I know have seen it, and
I
it's.
saw that it was on VOD yesterday when I was flicking through VOD.
It's actually a fascinating concept, and I do have to say I do still think that the filming of it was really nice. But now that I'm rewatching it, I'm like, oh my god, why didn't I see this the first time? It's such a trite plot. So
Is it horror or something?
it's a mix.
Okay.
It's more thriller, but it's got horror infused.
Okay.
So somebody else watch it and tweet me and talk to me about it.
if you like it.
It's driving me crazy. Or if you hate it, because I'm mixed now. But then the big thing that I watched this week that I'm kind of, passionate about talking about is the new American Horror Story. Now, I watched the new episode last week. I haven't seen the second one yet.
I can talk about them too.
I'm anxious to see where they go with the second one because I got to say, I have been the most devout American Horror Story fan for the past 3 seasons. Like the rest of TV could have gone to hell as long as I had American Horror Story. I don't know how I felt about this one.
You don't like David Bowie being sung off key by...
Oh, man.
By
that
her
was pretty rough.
pretending to
It was
be,
rough.
But I've heard
pretending
that
to be
was rough.
German. No, and I...
It still has the great
about
set design and stuff. But sometimes
It's
American
still
Horror
shot
Story takes a while to
beautifully.
get into. I thought the last season you got into it straight away.
But
this one I definitely feel the problem with Funhouse and Freaks and stuff is it's already been done well.
Yeah,
like there's a lot of great Freak stories that are kind of perfect. It feels like I hope they go somewhere different from where they've started. I agree. I wasn't pulled in straight away.
what did it for me this time, and I was thinking about this as the week went on, is every other American Horror Story, there might be batshit stuff going on, but there's always one character that you can say, okay, well, they're not that bad. I want to know what's going on with this girl, because out of everyone in this entire horrible coven of witches, she's not bad.
Right.
But this one, every single person, including the freaks, were horrible, because even I was like, oh, well, I guess the freaks are going to be the victor in this. Oh, no, they killed that guy. Oh, no, they drugged that girl with opium and had a mad sex orgy with her. They
Yeah.
raped her. Okay, now they're bad too. And then suddenly you're like, wait.
But sometimes maybe they're going to reverse something
I'm
and
hoping
play.
so.
I
But-
I got the feeling that the twins. One of the twin would be
Yeah.
good, and the other twin, that's gonna be the
Which,
story.
I mean, is just kind of the way you have to play it with a duality with twins. But it wasn't fun for me. It was depressing.
Also, you can go surreal and crazy, but when your lead character is an effect because she's two-headed,
Yes.
so you're always
Oh,
looking at
yeah.
an effect. That might be
And
tough to maintain.
The other
Yeah.
lead character is an effect as well. Not only is she German, very German to
Oh, yeah,
the
Jessica Lange.
point that it was a little painful
Yeah.
at times, but her legs are gone.
That's right.
So
It didn't grab me. First episode definitely didn't grab me. But look, I'll go on record. First
I'm
episode
gonna-
of American Horror Story ever. I still maintain it's one of the worst pilot episodes in the history of anything.
see, I loved it.
It was,
I
but
kind of liked it too.
it was
I
just
mean, I haven't seen it in
edited
a
like
while.
it was like a whole season in one episode. I didn't like it, but then the show I caught up to liking the rhythm of it. But
I'm hoping I have the second one sitting on my
Yeah,
DVR
when I get
at
home,
home
I
right
will,
now.
yeah,
I'm
too.
hoping to watch it and be like, oh, they turned it around. But man, I just did not have fun last week. I just did not. I was not riveted. Did you see it, Rob?
No, I'm so behind. I've seen the first season and the third season. I haven't seen
Asylum
second
is actually,
Asylum?
I like
I
Asylum.
haven't
yeah, I
gone
think
to
I
that
like
one
the
yet.
sound the most.
Coven is kind of my fave, but I think that might be from a female perspective.
I liked
love
Coven quite a lot. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to going back. I mean, that's the fun thing about that show is that you don't really have to go chronologically.
Yeah.
You
Right.
could just pick up a season. So that's why I went right to Coven.
Yeah, I wonder if it was maybe running out of this idea of recasting everyone you've seen before. I felt like maybe this time that had started to lose its charm to me. Like I almost want to see them work with new people. There's all these great actors out there.
Which I think is the plan for the next season. If they get, I'm sure they'll get to it.
Well, with this one too, I mean, American Horror Story so far has been built out of these shocking moments of, like, oh my God, they're going to go there. Oh my God, they're going there. Are they going to cut her head off? She cut her head off and things like that. And this one didn't have as many shocking moments. The only shocking moment was I was going to say the weird lobster boy getting off the 50s Housewives. That was kind of my are they going to go there?
Yeah.
Okay, they fucking went there moment.
It's the Mad Men, but with a lobster boy.
Yeah, with a lobster boy using his hands in creative manners.
It looks great still. We'll see. And, it could be they were, busy making Town That Dreaded Sundown, and this series maybe got rushed.
That's
Who knows?
true.
Yeah. That's a lot. They crank this stuff out pretty quick. It's year after year. That 1 year to come up with a full show like that, and they're long shows too. They're like 22 episodes or whatever.
So anyway, that's my rant on that. I'm seeing a whole bunch. I'm not going to be a hater because I'm hoping it gets a lot better. But I'm seeing a bunch of stuff at Screamfest this weekend, so I should have some good stuff by next week.
And I just want to throw this out there, even though I personally don't know if I can comment on it. But you mentioned Town That Dreaded Sundown, and you guys talked about it in the show.
My review of it is on Fango right now.
Yep, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. I would like to challenge any horror journalists out there. I've heard that there was a lot of... let's just say that the movie that you guys saw is not the movie that it was intended to be. I've heard of, that
was hinted at in the talk back.
Okay. Because a lot of times you hear, and this segues perfectly into the first thing I've seen. A lot of times you hear of a lot of studio tampering in terms of things. I managed in the last week, I actually spoke to an actor, one of the prominent actors in it, that told me that it was vastly edited, not the way that it should have been. So I'm just curious because it's been so quiet. Like they shot it a year or two ago and then disappeared, and then now it's out this month. So
it's hard to know in the first 2/3 what would have been different. Like it's hard because it's actually really well put together.
Really good.
The ending.
Yeah. Okay. The ending that makes total sense because the ending doesn't work. And the guy with the tight purple pants who was on stage being interviewed, aka Jason Blum, did hint that he didn't like certain things that other people liked, and there were silences in between these comments. So I don't know exactly what.
Yeah,
between him and the director, there was some silence there. But
you've got a director, you got Blumhouse, you got who else is in
Ryan Murphy.
Ryan Murphy.
You've got
Michael Foy was the cinematographer. It's like the whole American Horror Story.
You've got
team.
a lot of cooks in that kitchen.
Yeah,
in particular, production houses like Blumhouse and whoever else. But anyway, we'll get back to
his tight purple pants had something to do with it because they were pretty noticeable.
They were really bright, and you weren't. It was weird that afterwards the whole audience was talking about it was like Obama's tan suit, but in the horror world.
Yeah.
Well, that segues, speaking of tampered with movies, I ordered the super fancy limited edition version of Nightbreed directly from Scream Factory because I think the smart thing they're doing, because, obviously you're always looking for, as a horror fan, you're looking for the best deal. Usually you wait for Amazon. Scream Factory is now doing this thing where if you order directly from them, not only do you get a poster, but they ship it to you 2 or 3 weeks in advance.
Oh, that's right.
Ahead of street date.
Yeah.
So technically,
I was wondering how you got it before press because somebody was like, I was going to go watch it at Rob's house. And I was like,
I bought
they haven't
it.
even fucking sent out press copies yet. And I'm on the special things.
No, they have. Ryan got one before all of us. So,
what the
hell? I got all jealous. I was like, where's my copy?
I got mine last Friday.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the deal. If you order directly from Scream Factory, they'll send it to you early. So I got it 2 weeks early, and I went for the super expensive limited edition version, which comes with the director's cut, a bonus disc, and the theatrical cut, as well as a booklet and a nice little package. And all I have to say is, I actually got really emotional watching that director's cut. And not because I can't even explain it. It's just the fact that between that and the Halloween 6 producer's cut, which I'm going to mention later, it's just like, I can't believe Scream Factory has restored and released pristine copies of these movies. Because any other studio wouldn't consider them quote unquote good movies, as the genre is always looked down upon. But the fact that Clive got to finish this movie 24 years later, and that's what this is. This is not the Cabal cut. And just to be clear, the Cabal cut was a version that had VHS footage in it, and it was pretty much all the footage
rough. It was really
put together just so that you could see all of it in one piece. This is a 2-hour epic movie, completely restored from all the original elements, there's effects that are finished, and not even effects like they just did a CG thing. No, like if there was something that was stop motion, they finished it in stop motion. And it's like, so it feels like a long lost movie. It moves and works a lot better. There's much more creature stuff. There's much more of the love relationship.
Do you empathize more with the creatures now and think the humans are even worse? Or, I mean, is there any of that?
Yeah, because that was the point of the Cabal cut. Was the Cabal cut, it kind of became a romance story where it teased out Boone's relationship a lot more.
Which is great stuff in the beginning there. You know, like he goes, you know, when he's convinced that he is a serial killer, he goes to see her perform. So this musical number is put back in.
Oh, wow.
And he can't even bear to leave her. He's just in the back crying while she's performing. And it's a cool scene because in the audience, you know, there's an hour and a 15-minute long documentary on the director's cut disc where they're talking about, like, in that scene, like, Neil Gaiman's in the audience, Peter Atkins, like, all of, like, Clive Barker's buddies are just in the audience for that sequence. Decker is not, you know, everyone says, oh, they just bumped up Cronenberg. He's not in it any less. It's just that it's more spread out. So I actually think he's more effective.
Like a shark
Say
who
it,
pops
Elric.
out.
Being spread out.
Say it, Elric.
He's still got a gun. That's what I was hoping to change the line to, like, he's still 20 years later.
And I mean, again, it's an amazing, beautiful thing that they were able to do this. I mean, everything down to complete, like, you know, the sound mix, the visuals. I didn't know this, but apparently at the very last minute for the theatrical, they redubbed Doug Bradley completely with some German guy. Doug Bradley came back and just did ADR for this version.
That's awesome.
So he has put his voice back in.
That's phenomenal.
So it's an amazing thing. The one thing I will say is, you know, not that I regret buying the super fancy collector's edition because I like having that kind of stuff, but I doubt I'll feel the need to see the theatrical cut ever again. Like if I grab this off the shelf, it's
I already sold mine.
I might as well watch it. The only way you can get the theatrical on Blu-ray in high def was buying this version of it. So I almost feel like I don't need to see that again. However, you're fine just getting the single disc director's cut because on top of the movie, that hour documentary is fantastic and it's on that disc. All the bonus materials are cool, but you have to be a real diehard fan to really want to relish in all that material.
They were made by one of our friends, Andrew Furtado.
He edited the movie.
Oh, he edited the movie.
The director's cut itself, and he did a fantastic
also
job.
got a podcast that we're figuring out a date, but in the next few days we're gonna all three be guests on.
Yes.
So
regarding Netflix,
and it might be fun for listeners of this because maybe we'll be a little different when it's not our show. Maybe Rob's gonna cut loose and go a little crazy.
I'm getting drunk
on a Netflix show.
Yeah, Rebecca will get drunk.
But yeah, no, it's amazing that somebody can do. I haven't seen it. I really didn't like the Cabal thing, but that makes sense.
I think you'll love this.
Because I love the original, but it's just because I love the world.
Well, the Cabal
so if this
thing,
is a better version of the world, I'm sure I'll love it.
I saw the Cabal thing with you. And it was when I remember when
a lot
we
of people
saw
liked it that I was with, and I was like,
but I remember having a discussion with you afterwards, Elric, about how it was kind of painful to get through because you'd be watching this like pristine version and then it would cut to this horrible VHS grainy
weird accents.
No more of that.
Okay.
Everything's been, it's a complete movie. It's been, you know.
But the sound is still a little.
Nope.
Really?
Nope. Justin Cruz, who recorded a lot of our earlier episodes, came in and did a sound design mix on it.
He's also the DP on most of my films. Yeah. Love that boy.
He did an amazing job because I had it actually sounded better than most of my Bluerays through my system.
Justin Cruz used to be the board op for Geek Nation.
Yep. Did an amazing job on it. And again, same thing to Andrew. So many kudos. Andrew wrote a fun little blog that maybe I'll tweet to chronicling editing the Nightbreed director's cut, and it's pretty comical, and him going through Clive Barker's notes, which is kind of amazing to get notes from Clive Barker. But yeah, strongly recommend the director's cut. Check it out. Let us know what you think.
And it's amazing that some of these artists are going to get to see their work the way they wanted while they're still alive in this world, going, oh, that's more what I wanted. And that's kind of a nice thing.
I mean, there's a whole segment in Midian that you get to really see all that amazing creature design work, which I remember seeing in Fangoria's.
Okay, because in Fangoria, on the cover of Fangoria, our Nightbreed issue, the creature that we put on the cover, it never existed in the film, but it's in there now. It was the creature with the two hands coming out of his neck. He'd never made it into the film.
And I got excited because I thought of my young self being like, oh my God, I remember that on the cover of Fango. Yeah, that's all restored. It's great stuff. Let me jump right into the Halloween franchise since we're talking about the Scream Factory stuff. I continue my marathon with part 4, 5, and 6. I'll be super brief. Again, it's funny how as years change and you revisit these movies, like I think all horror fans have an allegiance to the Halloween movies, and October comes around, you want to watch all of them again or try to squeeze as many as you can. Part 4, I loved it as a kid. Kind of grew lukewarm on me as an adult, and now rewatching it again, for some reason I just was in love with it all over again. And I think a big part of it is it almost if as you said, as the point you've made about sequels and how they diminish the original, whatever. If you kind of take Halloween 4 on its own as a one-off movie, it's a pretty solid one-off movie if you've never seen any other Halloween movie in terms of getting you back into that world. Michael Myers, Loomis, the stuff that he does in it. It's a pretty straightforward story, but I think what I love about it is Ellie Cornell, who plays Rachel Carruthers, the lead character. Once this shit goes down, the fact that she will do anything to protect that little girl kind of makes her one of the best final girls, even though technically she's not a final girl in the context of the story.
Is she related to Danielle in that storyline?
Well, it's technically like her stepsister.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or adopted sister, or whatever the case is. But the fact that, I think I realized watching it, because I now as a 38-year-old, I was madly in love with her. And I was thinking,
Hollywood years, Rob, you're 20.
Years, 20. Now as a 20-year-old in Hollywood. Love with her. But I mean, when I was 12 and I saw the movie, I just had the biggest crush on her. But now it's more from the idea of like, wow, her character shift in terms of protecting this girl is amazing. And that's what makes Halloween 5 so awful. Is that
it's the down.
I used to like Halloween 5.
No.
I haven't seen it since like I was a kid, but I used to like that one.
You know what? I think it might. It's tough. It's probably the worst of the series now.
Wow. I just remember the clown costume.
Yeah, but that's in 4.
Yeah, that is in 4.
Is this the one where the girl's wearing the t-shirt saying, like, I do cops?
4.
Okay.
4 is great.
Cool. Yeah, that's
Cops
cool.
do it by the
that.
book. 4 is great. 5 takes everything that was in 4 and just kind of poo-poos it, including, spoiler alert, but you should know this by now, including killing Rachel.
Is this the one where
away.
the cops are in it way too much and there's just too much, like,
Well,
action?
there's comedic cops in it.
Yeah, I remember not liking that.
It was directed by a French director, and it's really weird and artsy, and they
Can I just say what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Fuck you, France. We got freedom fries all up in this country.
Yeah, well, Elric just told me that he wrote me a note that says he smells like sexy taters.
Yeah, that's
Stop
right.
writing notes over here.
I was responding.
But
I told him he smelled like rancid gravy.
I'm sorry, but let me try to. Yeah, all right. So 5 has things in it that are interesting that when I first watch, I watched it on Blu-ray a year or two ago when it first came out on Blu-ray, that I thought were interesting that I never noticed before. Composition of the shots, seeing Michael Myers in the background, etc. But I am at that age where I just watched 5 and I was so angry by how bad it was and how much it shits on 4 that I'm like, yeah, I just never need to watch this again.
Yeah.
I just don't care anymore.
But you're still going to keep it in your collection.
It'll be in my box set,
like that.
but I'm never going to watch it
Yeah.
again. Like I had no need. And in that same token, I went right to Halloween 6. And of course, I watched, I did a double feature. I watched the producer's cut, which is the long sought after original cut of the movie, and the theatrical. The theatrical used to never bother me that much. I mean, I remember when I was younger that obviously it seems like very oddly cut and there's stuff missing.
Is this Dwight
It's
Little?
weird. No, Dwight Little's 4. You keep going to 4.
I like Dwight Little.
You like 4.
I guess I
just
like 4,
rewatch it.
yeah.
It's great. It was Joe Chappelle, who was not really a horror director. The original director was Fred Walton, who did When a Stranger Calls. That's who was originally attached to D6. It became Joe Chappelle, not big in the horror world, but you know what? He gets, it's funny because Brian Collins always gives him shit for Halloween 6. Still, 20 years later, and Brian tweets all this stuff about Joe Chappelle not understanding Halloween. But you know what? He directed and was a major part of The Wire on HBO. So he gets a pass for being part of one of the greatest shows of all time.
Yeah, that's
quite
fair,
frankly. But no, so producer's cut. Look, neither version is a good movie. The movie was troubled from the get-go, and they're very candid on the special features. Dan Farrance did a new commentary about it and is very open about it. I think the coolest thing was Danielle Harris doing an interview talking about how she got screwed literally at the last minute and they replaced her. Well, not literally, but
Wow.
You know what I mean? But yeah, the producer's cut is by far a better movie. If anything, because of Donald Pleasance. The thing that's lacking in the theatrical cut is they rescored it with this terrible like guitar version of the Halloween theme. And because Donald died in between, they cut him. He's so minimal in the theatrical that you kind of want a little Crazy Loomis.
Right.
And at least the producer's cut has more Donald Pleasance in
Is this
it.
Paul Rudd?
Paul Rudd, introducing Paul Stephen Rudd.
I remember that scene where they're
Paul Stephen Rudd.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, in the theatrical, it's almost like there's no real reason for Loomis to be there, and that's because they eliminated and cut out a lot of his side story that is more prevalent in the producer's cut. So the point being is, I don't think I ever need to watch the theatrical again. I'd watch the producer's cut if anything, but it's still not a satisfying Halloween movie.
So next up is H2O.
Yes.
Which
and
I'm
looking forward to it.
Like a pilgrimage for us in college because it wasn't playing where I went. So we drove
super short, hardly a feature. I remember it being like 75 minutes when I saw it in theaters.
Yeah.
But it's got like Method Man.
Is it?
No, it's
Buster
LL
Rhymes.
Cool J. LL Cool J is that one.
I don't know.
You guys are racist, man.
No, they're all rappers.
Yeah, LL Cool J's in it. I'm looking forward to it. The documentary on that is fantastic. But I remember being lukewarm on it.
Except for the version that has the the hands coming in and doing effects.
The
16 millimeter one.
Widescreen 16. So.
And just to close out really quick, I think it counts as genre. I revisited two movies I've wanted to see for a while again. FX and FX2.
Well, I love FX.
Love it.
Jeff
love
Lieberman,
one of my
right?
No, Brian Dennehy.
Brian Brown and Brian Dennehy. Yeah.
Wait, I'm
love
confusing it with Remote Control. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I said Jeff Lieberman.
Is the Jeff Lieberman movie.
Yes.
No, FX is the first FX came out in 1986, directed by Robert Mandel, who is famous for quitting Carrie 2, which is why Cat Shea came in. But he also directed the X-Files pilot, which I think was pretty fascinating, and has done some TV work like that. But, the very basic gist of it is that Brian Brown is a very popular effects artist in Hollywood, and he gets recruited by the cops to create an illusion that a gangster who's in protective custody has been murdered, and they essentially con him into being the actual guy that pulls the trigger. And then it turns out that maybe it was actually a very cleverly designed assassination, and he is now framed for a murder he didn't really commit because he was hired to do this effects thing. And it's really fascinating because the people that frame him didn't take into account that he is the master of illusion. So as an effects artist, he's able to kind of manipulate and, put a beard on and be in disguise.
There's a big monster scene where the monster pops out and scares someone.
Yes, that's in his apartment.
Also, Brian Dennehy is, Brian Brown's the guy you're talking about, but Brian Dennehy as the cop, it's one of my favorite roles.
He's great.
His charisma in that movie is just dynamite.
It is.
And number 2 is good as well, but not the same magic.
I actually think,
it's good,
I will boldly say, and maybe it might be partly because I saw it in theaters and loved it so much, I like 2 better. I actually love part 2. It's directed by Richard Franklin, director of Psycho 2 and Cloak and Dagger, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really cool. It had the cool little clown prop and everything, and some cool little gimmicks.
I own these on a double DVD disc that I have never watched.
Worth watching.
They're so great.
I gotta watch them now.
They're so great. And they're about 5 years apart. So there's some really fun jokes in the second one that, it's in the trailer, but like when Brian Brown comes into Brian Dennehy's house, that monster thing pops up.
Right.
And Dennehy's like, I waited 5 years to get you.
Just to get
that one. So it's a lot of fun. I really love the effects movies. And I strongly
even though there's
recommend
not technically a part 3, I like to think of Cocktail as part 3 because Brian Brown's in it, flipping cocktails, and Tom Cruise a little troll.
I don't know about that, but all right. So that's that. Check those out. Let me know what you think.
We have a cool guest coming up.
I would dream if we were doing close to Halloween episode, if we could get the director of Fright Night and Child's Play in here, that would be a dream come true.
That would be a cool episode, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Welcome to Fright Night for real. Okay, welcome back. Here's a guest that we have been waiting to have on for quite a long time.
We've been talking about him for like a year now. We should have him on really soon.
He's
and
patting
we just
you
never
because he's
did.
excited that you said that.
He's
the compliment.
Excited. He's here. I like that.
And I'm gonna,
He's
I need
a really good friend of all of ours. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, but no, I'm gonna do the killer intro for this guest because of he's one of the first people that became a really good friend to me out here in Los Angeles when I came out. The first person I interviewed for the Psycho Legacy, and I was so intimidated by the whole process, but going up to his house, talking to him. And the funny thing about that was, I think not too long after, I invited you to the Fangoria Weekend at Horror Show were happening.
Yeah.
And me, Ryan, and Spooky Dan would do a little pre-Fango bash the night before.
Yeah. I've heard legendary stories
about
this.
They were legendary.
I never got to go because I was always like setting up for the actual convention. So I always got these invites and then I was like, God damn it, I have to work.
And I would have met you back then. But I remember when I first met this guest, I invited him out, and I think it was the first time that he got to meet a lot of the younger horror directors and filmmakers, and they were just so excited that you made an appearance that like every 5 seconds they came up to me like, introduce me to Tom. I'm like, okay. So with us tonight is Tom Holland. Hello.
Thank you.
What do you think of that intro, man?
I think it's absolutely wonderful, and you're right.
Do you remember all that?
Yes, I do. In fact, I remember sort of the bar and the party.
Yeah.
But you introduced me to, I guess I used to call it a subculture, but to the burgeoning world of genre fans.
Yeah. And then it influenced you quite a bit because you started meeting some of the younger guys like Mike Mendez and Adam Green and those guys, and everyone has like collections and stuff from their movies. And when I first went to your house, you didn't really have anything. You had a couple of movie posters.
Yeah.
But since then, you kind of joined the club. You've gotten some of the original Fright Night props back. They're framed. They're all over your place.
I've got all the Fright Night props back.
Yes.
Nice.
All in his place.
And you got to star in a movie for one of your fans.
Well, I had no sense of how valuable those things would be because they weren't at the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were talking earlier about 35 mil prints. Part of my deal was that I would get a 35 mil print of Fright Night and Child's Play. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, will you take a DVD instead? And this was just when DVDs were coming in. And I thought, and they were still fighting. Well, they were still fighting. Not a DVD, it was a VHS. And they were still fighting about Betamax or VHS. And I said, well, yeah, sure. Do you know how much I would love to have 35 mil prints? And I'll give you another one. I had an original Chucky doll.
Oh, okay? Wow. One of the original ones from the movie?
That we'd shot on. And I had it on the floor, standing up on the floor in a corner. And I had a German Shepherd named Cooper. Okay?
I don't like where this is headed.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't. He was the love of my life. He was a big male, and of course I had him since he was a puppy. And between chewing on it and peeing on it, he wrecked it. And my wife kept saying to me, would you throw that thing out, that filthy, dirty thing out? And I threw away an original Chucky doll, which must have been, about 3.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
It was one of the ones with one of the movie ones with the changeable heads. I only had one head.
Yeah.
Where exactly do you throw out the trash? Because I think we could trace this tonight.
Well, it was
Studio City pickup.
Well, it was years ago, and we all thought it was amusing. The dog was chewing on it. I mean, I didn't have any sense of that.
Nowadays, we all would have made you put it in a glass case.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
if it's in glass, it doesn't matter. It smells like dog piss. It
so
can stay in
you
there.
still didn't get the idea of how your films had become like part of a cult, like part of the canon until meeting Rob, or was it before that?
No, I had it's hard to. I felt embarrassed a bit. I went to a convention, and I can't remember which, here in L.A., soon after Child's Play was an enormous hit, and everybody was coming around and saying, please sign the autographs of this or that, and it scared me. I was an actor originally, but then my orientation for years was being a writer, and basically I'm a very quiet, I read a lot, I write a lot, if you're right, you try not to have your concentration disturbed. So I led a rather monastic life, except when I would come out and direct movies. And then I found it was hellish trying to get back into the mindset of writing, because directing is really a social activity. And directing, honestly, I've always thought was a lot easier. But because you have a whole support crew around you, which you don't have when you're writing. And so
it'd be amazing if you had a crew around you while you're writing.
I know.
You're doing great.
I really want a crew around me for everything that I do. So like I'm grocery shopping and they're like adjusting my lighting and things like that. I need that all the time.
I kept the neon bicycle, which was in the toy store from the opening of Child's Play. I took one of the original boxes and I opened it up and put it in plexiglass, a guy box. but then I left it out in the sun, in the hallway.
Oh.
And when I did that, they didn't have the
UV protection.
The UV protection.
Yeah.
Huh.
So I mean, I still have it, but it's it's gone.
Were there any remaining Chucky dolls from the original out there in the universe, or?
Well, I also had. Oh God, man, you don't want to ask the leather the leather jacket that Brad Pitt wore, because I really was one of the first guys to really give him a real shot. He did
Tales from the Crypt.
That's right. It ended up on Tales from the Crypt, but it was called King of the Road.
Yeah.
And he wore a very cool, very beautiful leather jacket, which had flames down it, painted on it. It was really gorgeous. But, and no offense, Brad, he was too narrowly built for me to get into it. So I gave it to my wife, who wore it back in the days when she went to leather bars. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's like a total badass jacket.
Okay, but
really,
listen to what she did. She gave it to her female trainer.
Wow, that's a hell of a gift.
But we didn't know it. I mean, we were taking the original posters from Fright Night, because I would make sure I got a tube or a box of those, and she was giving those away, and she didn't seal them right. And they got wet, and I still have a few of them left, but they're water stained in a corner.
You're listening to the most heartbreaking episode.
I know.
This is just to make you sad on Halloween.
Well. I mean,
Listen, there's plenty of silver linings here, because we had Nick Redmond from Twilight Time on a few weeks ago, and he was talking about we're doing a new Fright Night Blu-ray. I provided him with a lot of materials, most of which I think I'm allowed to say I got from your shed, because there was one period where Tom was out of town and wanted me to come over and make sure that the house didn't go up in flames, or
right.
take
You
care
house
of your dog.
You house set.
I house sat for a while, and out of boredom, no, not really boredom, just boredom and curiosity, I went into his shed, because he always said that he had tons of stuff from his movies.
I have three sheds in back of the house, metal sheds that I put up. Anyway, go ahead.
I dug out like tons and tons of I found Fright Night, tons of 8x10 photos, like all the on set photography.
Cool.
I scanned them all before you got back to town. Some of your original scripts, your original script on Fright Night. I think Beast Within was in there too. And one of the things that I think will be on this Blu-ray is, what are those tapes called? It was a tape that had about 95 minutes of EPK footage.
That's what we used to call them, EPKs.
Yeah, EPKs, the electronic press kits. We used to have at Fango, we literally had a room full, because when they would send us press kits, they would send us these EPKs, and they look like futuristic I sound drunk. Futuristic VHS tapes where they're like massive, and you had to have a special player to play them. We also called them DAT tapes. I don't know what the difference is, but yeah.
Well, for a long time they were like beta, because there was a higher quality. So we would use beta, and then the consumers would use VHS. There was that moment when there was a war between the two.
But we used to get the electronic press kits, and sometimes the studios would make us send them back, and then half the time they didn't even care. So like when Fango relocated from one office to another, that was one of my jobs, was I had to pack the room of EPKs, and it took forever. And they're all like really heavy and massive. So
right.
Yeah. So, have a cool one for Fright Night.
It was you hadn't seen
I had
it
I had it for Psycho 2. I know we had one for Psycho 2.
Yeah, I combed through all that stuff, and the Psycho 2 stuff ended up on Scream Factor's release, and I gave Twilight Time the one for Fright Night, which is really cool.
Which, the EPK?
It's the EPK. It's all stuff from around '86. It's like interviews with you guys on set. And
but this was the copy, the digital copy you made off of my EPK?
Yes, I put it on a DVD. When you got back, I made you a DVD of that. And
there's so many acronyms going on right now.
I have no memory. Jesus, no.
It's all there, Tom. That's all that matters. Let's go back a little bit before we delve into some of the stuff that our listeners know you for. One of the fascinating conversations we've had, and that a lot of people know, is that you started out as an actor.
Yeah.
But I remember once I was sitting at your place talking to you, and you were telling me all these great stories about getting into acting back in New York, because you're originally from New York, correct?
Mid-state farm country.
Right. Yeah. And was that always the first thing you wanted to do in terms of the entertainment industry?
No. I wanted to be a writer.
Okay, so it was always a writer first, and then you fell into acting.
Yeah, but this sounds vain and silly now, but I was, you know, I was a good-looking guy, and that sounds so dumb, but they said if you really want to meet girls, go to acting class. Yeah. And I swear to God, that's how I ended up being an actor.
I don't think you're the first one. I think Philip Seymour Hoffman, I read that about him. I've read that about Jack Nicholson. I think they all...
I swore that about half the guys in the drama department I came from. They were all just there to like
chicks.
Which drama department did you go to?
My undergrad's from Virginia Tech.
Okay. I went to Northwestern.
The slightly more prestigious acting department.
Northwestern in Illinois?
Northwestern outside of Chicago in Evanston.
Yeah. I used to
I almost went to Northwestern, and I went to do my interview there. I was going to go for journalism for my master's degree.
Excellent school for journalism.
And I was interviewing for the master's program in journalism there, and I went there, and on the day I did my interview, it was -10, and I swore I would never go back into the state of Illinois, and I haven't.
Okay.
We just lost viewers.
You did. She's right.
This is why I live in Los Angeles.
You haven't experienced cold until you walk across campus at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I would have my face wrapped in a scarf, and it would be solid ice around where my mouth, where the breathing was.
I remember I flew in and I left Virginia, and it was like in the 60s, and this was in, I want to say like maybe March or April, because I was going to start in the fall semester. And I left Virginia and it was like 60, and I landed in Chicago, and I remembered I got to the Northwestern campus and there was snow on the ground and the wind was blowing snow at me, and I like my contacts, I had to take them out because my eyes were watering so bad, and I was like, I can't freaking do this. Never. Okay. So power to you for going there.
Welcome back to Memories of Chicago.
Well,
where we explore the weather of Illinois in depth. Thank you to listeners.
I had forgotten how cold it was, and I chose Chicago to shoot Child's Play in,
which it looked great.
Yeah.
I think that did something for it.
He brought it back, guys.
He brought it back.
And I had one of the coldest winters on memory, and I was like, "You fool! Didn't you remember what it was like when you were at Northwestern?" And we had the cameras kept freezing. We had to have multiple. We'd have the camera out for 10 minutes. We'd take it and put it back inside the camera truck because the oil inside.
Wow, I never even thought about that, because I know cameras can be affected by heat. Like the red will overheat if you.
No, these were film cameras. These were real cameras.
Real cameras. So, but I didn't even think that they would freeze up.
Yeah. And I remember standing up when I was shooting by the Chicago River and leaning into it without any support and almost going like this, a 30-degree angle, and the wind kept me up.
Wow.
I mean, it was really ferocious.
I will say this about Chicago. When I moved from New Zealand to Chicago, I was shocked when somebody told me that it wasn't called the Windy City because of the wind. Like, I couldn't believe that because it was so freaking windy. But it wasn't.
Why is it called that? History of Chicago.
Because of the politicians being full of hot air and stuff. Oh. And so literally,
I didn't know that.
This is true. Like,
educating all of us.
People would always tell me this, and I'm like, how is that possible? Given that it is so windy there.
Yeah.
Like. You fall on your ass once every winter there too.
What happened to me though at Northwestern was what it did to me is that I realized I really had almost no interest at all in theater, and I didn't. And I made my first 16 millimeter film at Northwestern when they didn't have a film department.
Wow.
So it was and there was like one guy with an 8 mil and a 16 mil, and we used a cold splicer, which is one of those splicers where you wore white gloves and used acetone to do your cuts. We went out and shot it, and then I took it with me to New York when I went and I started as an actor, and I ended up co-working on it, co-editing it with Milton Katsalis. Now, does anybody remember Milton Katsalis?
Not a bit.
Okay, Milton came out here, and for a period in the 70s and 80s was the top acting teacher. He also directed a film called, I think, Butterfly, which he got because he had a master class which had every major star in it at the time. And he passed now a long time ago. But we used to play pool with him, and that was back when people didn't think about making films because it was so expensive and so difficult. Because we're sitting and talking about our love of 35 mil prints, but the huge revolution is the crushing of production costs with digital, which makes it open to everybody. You hear that out there? Anybody can make a film, but you have to have some talent.
Yeah. You still need something to say.
Yeah.
That's the hope, anyway.
You need a script.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you were, what kind of stuff did you do in New York? Because I know some of your television. Tom was in an episode of The Incredible Hulk. I just want to point that out.
That
As an
kind of
actor?
kicks ass.
I was a guest star. I was.
Cool.
He was a villain. He is essentially, you know the evil sensei in the first Karate Kid?
Okay. Yeah.
He
yeah,
did
of
that
course.
first in an episode of The
Tom-
Incredible Hulk.
Wait, what's his name? The evil sensei. Why don't I remember his name?
Martin Kove is who played him in
Yeah.
Karate Kid.
Okay.
But it was an Incredible Hulk episode, and the character was Frank Silva, played by Tom Fielding, which was
Right.
your acting name.
That was my acting
Because there was a Tom Holland,
There was
right?
another Tom Holland who did voiceovers.
Tom Holland was your original last
Yes,
name?
that's my
real
name,
name.
Thomas Lee Holland. But I couldn't use it in the union because there was a Tom Holland who did cartoon voices. And so at that point, and I think still now, you couldn't have two actors with the same name.
Well, you still have that. I mean, like on IMDb, people compete over, I use my middle name. Well, I have to use the
Right.
third and things like that to accommodate.
I did look, just a second ago, there was like 5 Tom Hollands. But, you rose
common.
to the top.
It's like
you
doppelganger.
showed that voiceover actor who was boss.
Well, no, I worked a lot. I ended up I was in New York. I left at the end of my freshman year. I spent the summer there, and I got a 7-year contract at Warner Brothers. And I was just there at the moment when the classical studio system was crashing and burning. They had gone on to remain financially viable by going into television. That started in the late 50s. I was there in the early 60s. Warner Brothers still had the sets, the Camelot standing in the back lot where Columbia was. Ultimately, Columbia went there, and of course, Columbia's now been bought. But they also had, and I could tell you, I could take you to the stage, but I can't remember the number. They had the original sets from My Fair Lady of the Ascot Races, of the Ascot Race still standing. And they were shooting Frank Sinatra's picture, Something in the Seven Dwarves. What was the Seven Hoods?
Don't know that one.
Frank Sinatra and they were all in it. Dino and Sammy and the biggest thing in the lot was that Frank flew in his helicopter from Palm Springs. I was like, I had to go and have the court approve my signature because I just had turned 18.
Wow.
And so I saw that they were still talking about Humphrey Bogart and his wife.
Lauren Bacall.
No, the one
before
before the fighting something they called him Bethot. I can't remember his first wife. I remember being taken. I didn't really know what I was doing. But Jack Warner played. I'm sure this is not interesting to our audience, but Jack Warner played tennis, and he had a tennis court built just inside where the administration building still stands. It was on the inside.
And it was Robin and the Seven Hoods from
Robin and the Seven Hoods.
1964.
From 1964. Okay, that was the year. They were shooting it. Anyway, that tennis court, when the head of security, I think, took me around, they would flood the tennis court, and that's where they did their miniatures of the pirate ships.
Oh, weird.
And that's where they had shot all the miniatures in the Errol Flynn pirate movies.
Oh, yeah.
Like, one of them's really famous, the name's out of my head now, but they'd done them in that tennis court.
Wow.
And it was directly opposite where they had this sort of Spanish long building where they had all the costumes. I mean, anyway, I had,
Were you a film lover when you got to, were you someone who had grown up seeing a lot of films?
I was,
or not really?
no, I was always a film lover. But they didn't have film schools. And I know that sounds impossible to believe now, but what they had in those days were summer stock and winter stock. And I played in both. I ended up on tour, ending up with going back to Chicago with, I was in Come Back Little Sheba. I can't remember what the other plays were there. I had so many friends, and among them were all the guys that ended up in Fellini's
Roma?
The one where all the boys died of AIDS. They were all beautiful and they were all gay. And they were in Fellini's...
Roma? The one of the big...
No, the one that about Nero or about dissipation in the Roman Empire, I think it was a period piece.
Oh.
Maybe it was Pasolini.
Yeah, 120 Days of Sodom?
Maybe.
Salo?
Maybe.
That's the one that had a lot of kids in it.
Maybe. I'd have to go back and look up the names.
Could be Pasolini, yeah. Defoe's playing Pasolini in the new movie.
Yeah.
It looks amazing.
crazy.
It looks amazing. Abel Ferreira looks incredible. It's because no one knows how he really died.
He got beaten to death by a hustler.
That's what they say, but a lot of people think the government killed him because of his previous film. Man, who knows? Who knows?
Crazy.
I think a lot of listeners listening to this are pretty concerned, though, because you said you got into acting for a woman. Did that work? Because I haven't heard anything about tail. I want to hear, did Tom get tail?
Did you finally get that?
Well,
Pass.
Yeah, no,
Well, he's married, so.
I've known a lot of people.
Yeah, there you go.
I have a lot of stories. So anyway, I ended up doing that. I came out. I was in a 7-year contract. That ended because Warner Brothers crashed and burned, and Jack Warner sold Warner Brothers to Kenny Parking Systems, which was Steve Ross, and then subsequently, Jack said it was the biggest mistake he ever made because nobody would have lunch with him anymore. When he says he didn't own the studio.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are, I don't know if these are tales for the genre crowd or not.
Yeah, but it all starts there.
Yeah,
I mean, all the movies we love since have
film
come
history.
from there. Yeah.
But then I ended up doing soaps in New York, and I would come back out here. I did a Chrysler Theater with Anne Bancroft and Jack Warden and Michael. Oh Christ, Bronson. In came Bronson. Who Rob? He works for Tarantino all the time now.
Oh, Michael Parks?
Michael Parks.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
Michael Parks.
Yeah.
And then I think the biggest thing, I was in A Walk in the Spring Rain in 1970 with Anthony Quinn and Ingrid Bergman. And I played Anthony Quinn's son, if you can believe that. And then I was in the Actors Studio, and this was when Lee was teaching Strasberg, and they had a playwrights wing. And we would put on 1-act plays. We put them on their feet. And there was a lot of writers there. Jim Bridges was one of them. Stuart Stern. Stuart Stern wrote Rebel Without a Cause, and Sybil, among other things. And Jim Bridges had written Kronos. What was the movie about computers taking over the world?
There's been a couple.
Jim Bridges ended up doing Paper Chase, directing that.
His name's familiar. I don't.
Well, he's passed too. I mean, what I did. This is so. It isn't just all happiness. A lot of my generation got wiped out by AIDS. The gays. And Jim was gay, and he lived with a lovely fellow who played Jimmy Olsen on Superman.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, I've just so all through my life. Anyway, they were putting plays in their feet, and I started helping the directors. I mean, I was in them as an actor, but I started to learn how to direct by once again going back and directing theater, and I got much more interested in that. And that was that moment in time in, I guess, late 60s, 1970, early 70s, where all of a sudden, if you wrote an original screenplay, there was a market for originals, whereas now you could write 100 of them and die. But there was that moment, when the town was looking for that, when the old Hollywood really died and didn't know what they were doing and was lost and looking towards the young people, the Raging Bull. That book was about that generation.
Yeah.
That's Spielberg and De Palma and
Schrader, Scorsese.
Yeah.
yes,
Paul
and
Schrader.
Carpenter and all those people, and things were open, and so. Because I was also working production commercials and I was directing commercials and I was trying to get into directing film because at that point, all the respect and prestige and heat was in film, not in TV, which once again is the reverse now because, film is going down the drain and TV is the place to be. And so I started writing so I could direct because I'd had a sense of confidence from from working with directors and doing these one-act plays at the Actors Studio, which at that point, when Strasberg was still alive, was on DeLong Prey, in back of Sunset Boulevard.
Were you still writing during the whole period that you were doing the acting, or were you just concentrating on acting?
No, I came back into writing when I was in my late 20s. And I really wanted to do that. I just got less and less interested in acting. Now, to do it now, like I did that thing in Hatchet 2, and I just did a thing about as a mad clown and John Skipp's thing and the shorts.
Yeah, oh, you're in that. Both our kids were in it.
In it. They used my house.
And we shot some of it with them, but not when you were there.
Yeah, they actually shot at both of my houses because I was moving at the time. They shot at the house I was moving
They
from.
talked about
and the house I was moving to.
Yeah.
And the house that you were in, that you moved out of, they destroyed because they could.
It.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that's the house I was moving to because at the time I was completely renovating
blood
it.
Bags.
So they set off blood bags in one of the rooms because I was completely tearing all the walls down. So I was like, do whatever the fuck you want, guys. And we were working on it while they were shooting, and we almost lit the house on fire.
Okay, well,
that wasn't Tom's fault. So.
No, we were we were running electricity because at the time while they were shooting there was
no electricity. They talked about it.
And I warned them in advance. I was like, we have no plumbing and no electricity, but you guys can do whatever the fuck you want. And so they're in there and they've like completely renovated one of the rooms into a room for one of the clowns, and they're getting ready to set off these blood bags, and we're underneath running electrical. And we were I was using a spark stick to a soldering iron to burn some of the electrical wires together, to solder the electrical wires together.
Wow.
And so I'm under the house doing this, and some of the leaves catch around me.
Oh my God.
And so I'm just like patting them out, but I mean, of course they're smoking like mad. And so by the time that it was literally like 2 leaves smoking, but by the time I pat them out, the house is full of burning leaf smoke, and everybody's in the yard and freaking out. It was funny.
Independent filmmaking.
Yes.
I played the clown with no name.
Oh, nice.
Is awesome.
You're really good in it, by the way. I've seen little bits.
Oh, have you?
And Andrew Cash and John Skip directed, and Andrew emailed me one night saying, you know what, we have this clown.
Yeah.
I think Tom would be good. Do you think he would do it? And I was like, I'm sure he probably would.
So what's happened is that I got bored with it when I was like late 20s, and now I enjoy it again.
The acting thing,
yeah, it's interesting, and there was a very talented couple of guys in that who played the 2 main clowns. I can't remember
Graham Denham and I can't remember the name of the other one. But the person who was actually under the house setting the leaves on fire was
you.
No, it wasn't me. It was somebody else who was working for us at the time, was under the house setting the leaves on fire, and he wasn't used to filmmaking. And so when he emerged, he was like, I don't even know what was going on. There were just all these people looking at me as, like the house was burning down. And, but even he was like, that guy was amazing. So, apparently they did a great job. So, Andrew, you're getting a lot of free plugs here on your film.
Yeah.
So everyone's excited to see
John
it now.
Skip. And Graham.
And Elric and mine's kids are in it.
That's right.
John Skip, who co-wrote the novelization of Fright.
That's
yes.
right.
Just to connect it, which I think is kind of fun.
Beginning of Splatterpunk.
Yes, exactly. So once you started writing, you're credited for Initiation of Sarah, The Beast Within. Did it happen right away for you in terms of getting those ideas, or did it take a while?
Took about 5 years.
5 years, okay.
Yeah.
And which one of those was first in terms of actually getting you attention?
Initiation of Sarah. But what was happening to me was what I was seeing in my head is still happening. I was seeing in my head things that they couldn't do yet. You have to remember this was before CGI and computers, and and I wrote Initiation of Sarah has been remade. There isn't anything I've done, it seems, that hasn't been remade.
That's a testament of love, though, right?
What was Initiation of Sarah a made-for-TV movie, or was that?
Yes, it was, but they remade. I mean, they even remade the TV movies. I think it's been made once or twice.
At least once for sure. Recently, not too long ago.
But anyway, I started. It was rather famous at the time because it was the blonde lady with the sharp nose.
The original one?
Yes, it was so hot at the time, and you'll remember her. And anyway, they're looking it up they're using their IMDb or whatever. I'm
in a race with Rob.
Well, she ended up playing the sorority mother in the remake.
Oh, weird.
Anyway, it was about about witches in one of the sororities, and I had them cursing the snobby girls.
Shelley Winters.
No, not
Kate
Shelley.
Lens.
No, not
Kay Lenz.
No.
She played Sarah.
Anyway, what?
Oh, Morgan Fairchild.
Morgan
Fairchild.
Fairchild. There
that's
you
it.
go. Anyway, that movie became famous because they took Morgan Fairchild as a young lady and threw her in the fountain. And it was the first wet T-shirt movie to go on ABC, on network TV. And they could see her nipples, and it created a scandal. This is like 1977 or 78. Anyway, I was writing transitions where the girls were cursed and they turned into barnyard animals. And ABC looked at me and said, "Are you mad? We can't do that. We can't afford to do that. There's no way to do it." And of course, they were right. And I got rewritten and knocked down in terms of the effects. And the same thing happened, but to a lesser degree with Beast Within, because by then, Beast Within was at that moment between Howling. I think Howling was before, but American Werewolf
London.
was just like 3 or 4 or 5 months after.
Yeah.
And so it was at that moment where all of a sudden practical effects were really exploding in terms of what they could do. And the Tom Burman did great makeup effects on Beast Within, but it was still pneumatics.
Right. It was before everyone started doing the transformation scenes that became famous in horror.
That's right. I mean, because a big step forward in that was Werewolf, in London, where they had the snout,
Yeah.
shove out, which you saw again in Alien in 1980 or 81.
Yeah.
But this was before you could, before computers. Anyway, I was into that and doing all that before anybody else did it, and I was doing another page, and I kept getting fired. Because they kept saying, "Well, there's no way to do this. This isn't affordable." And then the technique started to catch up to me, and it really caught up full time in Fright Night with Richard Edlund. And what happened there was I inherited through the head of production at Columbia, a very, very nice man called Shel Schrager. I inherited the entire effects team that had worked on
Ghostbusters.
And so they had made all their mistakes on this huge budgeted movie, and same studio, but they knew exactly what would work for our little budget on Fright Night. But that's why the effects are so good, because I inherited the same effects team. But so I sort of grew up with the growth of the transition of effects in Hollywood, at least practical in-camera effects.
And that was such a budding time, because I can't even remember the name of the writer now, but there's a really good book that refers to it as the Scar Wars.
The Scar Wars.
Why can't I remember the name? This is like one of the best books on horror in Hollywood. But the chapter is actually called The Scar Wars, and it talks about how at the time it was literally just films trying to outdo each other effects-wise, but that there was so much talent in Hollywood in effects at that time. And now, like 10 minutes from now, I'm going to remember the name of the book that discusses it.
Right.
And then I'm going to have to butt back in and say it.
Well, you can see it at Monsterpalooza to give what's his name, to give Elliot
Brodsky
a plug. But I mean, that people who go, that's about horror art, and that's about the sculptures and the storyboards. That's where that stuff is, because you'd do little sculptures of the monsters and what you wanted, so people could see it and then could break out the appliques, the makeup they needed for it. There was a name for the sculptures, maquettes.
Maquettes.
Oh,
maquettes. Armatures go back to like. That's
like what the original King Kong was.
Well, that's when they do stop. They do stop motion, and that's that you see that Mighty Joe Young. And I mean, I went over to Darabont. Frank Darabont has the original armature from Mighty Joe Young.
Yeah.
Have you been to Bob's basement?
Bob Burns.
No, I haven't, but everybody talks.
Oh my God, it's
great.
I have the documentary.
I could die in that room and be pretty fucking happy.
That can be arranged.
Go there.
Yeah, $1,000 and 6. I'm your man
Wow.
to wipe someone out.
Wow.
You kill me.
I just
for
saw Gone
freaking
Girl.
sex.
Gone Girl's on my
Hey,
brain.
no spoilers. No spoilers.
I wanted to ask you a couple things about before you directed with the writing, if it was satisfying, because you wrote one of the best films ever made, but you didn't get to direct it. And I think everyone on earth would say it's one of the greatest films ever made, which is Cloak and Dagger.
Ha, yeah.
And I did not know until I got
I thought you were
here.
going to say Psycho too.
No, Psycho 2 is obviously, but as a kid, and I'm only saying this because when I was about 12, Cloak and Dagger had one of the, I just, caught it as a kid. I think they played it at school and blew me away.
Yeah.
And I have not thought
Big
about that
cable movie for me.
honestly, till tonight, because I didn't even know you wrote that till today. I know all your horror stuff, but I didn't know about Cloak and Dagger. So, and it's for the same director, obviously, who did Psycho 2. So, did you, what's it like to see somebody else go off and then translate the screenplay, as it were?
Well, I adored Richard Franklin. I owe him so much, and he's passed. So I can be a little bit honest. Oh boy, I don't know how honest to be, because everybody, Hollywood's about backslapping.
Well, we love. We love Psycho 2, and I obviously
yeah.
love. So you can say,
Well, I know you've told me to be, you've told me that Psycho 2 was one of those marriages between writer and director where everything worked beautifully.
Everything
Whereas
worked.
Cloak and Dagger, good but not as perfect.
And that's
And-
after.
Psycho 2.
After.
Yeah, after.
Psycho 2.
Yeah,
And
there's-
the
Well-
name of the book that has the phenomenal chapter on the birth of effects or the emergence of effects in the 1980s is The Monster Show by David Scull.
Oh, I know that
Oh.
book.
Yeah, everyone knows that
The
book.
Monster
I
Show.
just
By
couldn't
David
remember.
Scow? David J. Scow?
Yes.
Well, he
No,
wrote
no,
Scowl,
there's
Scowl,
two of them.
Scowl.
It's actually, it's
Not-
Scowl.
yeah,
David
not
Scowl.
Scowl. Okay.
Not the
S-K-A-L.
Crow. writer.
Okay. The Cloak and Dagger was a famous movie through the 90s because it was on rotation on cable all the time.
Yeah.
And now they haven't played it.
Yeah,
to
I haven't seen
speak
it for a
of,
long time.
Like for 10 or 15 years. And
Dabney Coleman at his peak.
I went into a meeting about 2 years ago with Orsi, the other guy. The two of
from
them.
Lost.
Yeah.
It
And
is David J. Scowl, by the way.
it is David J. Scow.
That's him. That's who wrote Monster Show.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Different.
Different.
The-
Not David J. Scowl.
It's Scowl, yeah. And it's like Cloak and Dagger's like number 3 or 4 in their remake list, Universal. But they have, so I think they deliberately held it back from an audience. It used to be on Netflix, but it isn't on Netflix anymore. Anyway, at a period, that was a huge film and very influential if you saw it as an adolescent, like you did.
Yeah, because it treated, I think, young people like you weren't just nothing. Like, he's treated like an equal partner to the spy.
Yeah.
It had that, you know what I mean? Which I think is important when you're making films for young people.
Well, it was a huge opportunity. Richard was 100% there. Franklin, the director, on Psycho 2, which I still think is just a terrific film and terrific acting and Tony and everything. But I named the boy in Cloak and Dagger Davy after his son, and his son was autistic, and that began a period of he and his wife going from hospital and a therapist, and because nobody really quite then knew what it was. I mean, it was just at the beginning. I've never understood this, by the way, but it was just at the beginning of the explosion of autistic children. And Richard was therefore distracted, or he wasn't as present for me as he was during Psycho 2. He wasn't as concentrated, so it was a really, I'm patting myself in the back, but it was a terrific script, but it was not as good a movie as it was a script. Whereas I felt Psycho really fulfilled the script 100%. For one thing, and I said with all due regard to Dabney Coleman, but I always thought it should have been Kevin Kline.
He's great. Yeah.
I wanted him for the father. And I remember sitting at Universal in a meeting with Tom Mount, who was then head of Universal, and he said to Richard and I, "You'll take Dabney Coleman, or you won't make the movie.
This is your Mulholland Drive
I was
moment.
gonna say, this is the girl.
Well,
This is the girl.
We'll take Dabney because if that movie had worked right, you should have been dissolved in tears at the end when Dabney's emotionally reunited with his son and the imaginary character Jack Flack and the father merge as one, and the boy realizes that his father's the real hero and he no longer needs an imaginary hero. And by the way, they ripped us off in Last American Hero or whatever the Schwarzenegger movie was. Badly, I might add. But anyway, the script was more moving than the movie was. And that also because I wasn't there during a lot of the filming. Because I was working, I was writing.
You were on Psycho 2 though. You were on.
Yeah, I was there a lot, for Psycho 2. But Psycho 2 was we storyboarded that together. So I was in on the shot choices. I was in on the visual sequences, and I didn't have the same influence on Cloak and Dagger that I had, but Cloak and Dagger was a remake of a 1946 or 47 movie called The Window by Cornell Woolrich, which was the adolescent version of Rear Window by the same writer. It was a Boy Who Cried Wolf story, and it wasn't enough and it wasn't fresh enough to interest an audience, so I created Jack Flack. Was the boy's imaginary hero. What he wanted is what he wished his father was. And while I was doing that, I had the idea. I thought, because it was a Boy Who Cried Wolf story, I thought, well, wouldn't it be hysterical if a teenage horror fan became convinced that his next door neighbor was a vampire?
Oh, wow, so that was birthed in that period.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes,
that's cool.
it came off of
Because it does have that rear window angle, yeah.
That's right. That's why it does. That's why it has the voyeuristic element, because I was writing Cloak and Dagger. Now it was only, I don't know how much long, a couple of years later maybe, that I wrote Cloak and Dagger, but I didn't have a story with Cloak and Dagger until I thought of the Peter Vincent character. I had an idea. I had that idea of a horror movie fan, and I thought it was hysterical. There's a very amusing, charming idea, that because because we're all fans.
Right.
Everybody out there, everybody around this table too, we're all fans. We all love the genre, and so I thought, well, if you if you were a horror movie fan, for sure nobody would believe you, and what would happen if you turned out to be right?
Yeah.
So that was anyway. Yeah, but Cloak and Dagger is just a terrific film, and I think they should remake it. And if it works right, you should really be moved at the end, because that was the intention of the script. Also, between Cloak and Dagger and Fright Night, I wrote a script called Scream for Help, which was made into a movie by
Michael Winner.
Yes.
And that was going to be my other question, because I'm a big Michael Winner fan. Do you know what he ended up doing in his life?
Yeah, he ended up being a food critic.
Like one of the best in England, and this is the guy who made Death Wish 2, Death Wish 3.
Wow.
He's a very entertaining guy. Like I don't know him personally, so you can. I was going to ask what it was like, and he made The Sentinel.
Oh, wow.
For horror fans.
My gosh.
But he there's a great interview with him, one of my favorites online, where he's being attacked by basically a man who's trying to defend feminist rights about Death Wish 2. And he's smoking a cigar on cable TV as they're attacking him and just laughing it all off, going, it's just a bit of fun, And he's smoking this big cigar and they're going, but don't you think your depiction? And he's just like, I don't really think about that. And it was one of my favorite things I've ever seen, to be honest. Now, I've never seen Scream for Help, and that's another one I watched the trailer before I came here, and it looked to me like beat for beat what Stepfather would become.
But it was before Stepfather.
No, it was, but that's what I mean. It looked literally like the story outline of what the Stepfather would become.
Well, it forced me to direct because it was unreleasable, and I had
a bad Michael Winner story.
Bad Michael Winner story. But actually, I liked Michael Winner personally a lot.
He seemed like that kind of guy.
Now, I had seen Michael in full Hollywood mode because I was at AFI when it was in the third year of its existence, when it was still at the Doheny Mansion. And they had among the people who came in and spoke, this must have been about 72 or 3, was George Stevens Sr.
Wow.
The German with the eye patch.
King Vito or
No.
Otto Preminger?
No, I know who you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about.
The guy made the 3D. That's for Vincent Price 3D film.
Yes,
House of Wax.
House of Wax.
The director of House of Wax.
That was Toth, wasn't it?
Yeah,
wasn't
that's Andre Toth.
The guy who made Metropolis.
Oh, Fritz Lang.
Fritz Lang.
Oh, okay.
If you wanted Mean, you ain't seen Mean till you saw Fritz Lang. Okay, I mean, really.
Really? He must have been old then. I mean, that must be really late.
Yeah.
Because he was also in Goddard's
I think I
Contempt.
was like 28 or 9. So yeah, he was there. He was old.
Uh-huh.
But you still saw the last vestige of Hollywood when
Directors as dictators.
well when George
Yeah, he didn't die till 76.
Yeah.
So
when George Stevens came in, he brought his whole crew with him.
Wow.
I mean, he was God. He made Shane. I mean,
My all-time number 1 movie is A Place in the Sun.
Well, I mean,
I've got that poster on my office.
just wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, wonderful. I mean, Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor in her. Jesus God, talk about
beyond
beautiful.
prime. Beyond prime.
prime.
No one gets primes like that.
Well, I mean, that was so long ago. Shelley Winters was sexy.
yeah, she was all right.
But George Stevens Sr. maybe one of the 2 or 3 biggest directors in Hollywood. And that's why you get into these conversations. And I think you have to put things into their historical perspective. You know, we talk about films, but, you know, everybody thinks that the films that happened during their lifetime, especially in their youth and mine, when we're all impressionable, are the greatest films of all time. But I think George Stevens doing The Whole Town's Talking, which was, believe it or not, Cary Grant, when he's the socialist bomb thrower, and that was one of the great comedies. I remember Roddy McDowell being so impressed with George Stevens. I think Roddy may have been in George Stevens' The Bible.
Well, what did you see, Roddy, in that made you want to cast him?
Class of '84, which I wrote.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. Yeah.
they killed the bunny.
Yeah.
Poor science class bunny.
And I wrote that scene.
I loved that movie.
Who directed that one?
Mark Lester.
Mark Lester.
And it was the best thing he ever did. And Mark did a wonderful, wonderful job with it.
I went as the girl from that for Halloween a couple of years ago. It was one of my favorite costumes. Got the bangs and everything.
Anyway.
So that was the first time you met. I mean, you knew who Roddy was, obviously. But
Okay,
that was the
let
first time you
me
met
get
him?
back to the point about that AFI and that third year at Blackstone or whatever it was called, the Doheny Mansion. Michael Winter came in and was one of the guys who spoke to us. And he was then the hottest director in Hollywood because of Death Wish.
Yeah.
And all he was doing was bragging about how great Wonton Ton, the magic dog, what was it called? The Hollywood.
What?
Yeah, look it up. Look at IMDb.
Okay.
It. Michael Winters, Wonton Ton. He did a Rin Tin Tin story, and
It was called Wonton Ton.
something like that, and it was a major disaster.
Why does that sound racist?
And it wrecked, and it put a real dent in his career.
That's probably why he did sequels to Death Wish.
Anyway.
You always go back and milk what worked.
Well, he did really good.
The Mechanic's good.
Yes, the Mechanic's terrific.
Mechanic's really good.
Better
And the
than-
Sentinel's really good. Sentinels are really, and that was his first horror.
If you talk to Chris Sarandon, he would tell you the Sentinel ruined his career.
Oh, really?
And was the worst experience of his life.
Yeah.
Wow. For what reason?
You'd have to ask Chris. I remember Chris telling me about that because he was terrified of doing Fright Night because of his experience on Sentinel.
Interesting.
And he just hated Michael Winter.
Yeah.
And Michael took me out to lunch at what was then the most fashionable Hollywood restaurant, which is where the great chef was and where Orson Welles ate. And it closed down soon thereafter, but it was the place you had to go to be seen because he was a gourmand.
Which he ended up
What
being.
he was a terribly, Michael Winter was a terribly sophisticated bon vivant who never had a woman with him who wasn't. And I mean,
Like Larry Cohen. Well, at least with
I'm biting my tongue because I know all these people.
Yeah. Let's just throw that out.
But Herb Jaffe. Yeah, anyway, the picture was unreleasable. The Scream for Help, and it was The Stepfather, and I thought.
I mean literally. Like sometimes I see a trailer where I'm like, oh, there's similarities. When I saw the trailer today, I was like, oh my god, this is the plot beat outline of what The Stepfather would have been before. Yeah, so they would have copied that.
Well,
with better actors.
I don't know that had a rewrite on it by Donald Westlake, a Stepfather, and I thought it was terrific and starred a girl that I know who I think is a terrific actress, Jill Scollin.
Phenomenal.
Yes,
yeah. No, I think The Stepfather is a great movie. I think it's actually really well. Tara Quinn's really good in it.
It's called Wonton, the Dog Who Saved Hollywood.
There you go.
1976, Michael Winner.
There you go.
Starring Madeline Kahn.
There you go.
Wow.
In a rector's career. But anyway, Michael didn't have a clue how to do suspense. That was what was just like, not a clue.
Oh, they remade it, by the way.
Wonton?
Yeah, there's a remake.
Are you serious?
Or at least there's talk of one.
Breaking
or is that just
news.
a new poster?
Oh, my God. That I didn't know. Anyway.
What was Michael's strength then
it's
as a
just
director?
Talk of one.
Michael did 70s action.
Yeah, kind of
with a noir feeling.
Yeah.
Down and dirty. And Michael's whole idea of directing was to shoot it and then cut as much of the dialogue out as he could because that had worked with Charlie Bronson.
Right.
And he'd play in reaction shots. And so Herb Jaffe hired Michael Winner because he thought he could get him cheap because not only did he direct, he also was an editor. And it was the worst choice you could. He was such a mismatch between Michael and the script. And of course, Michael's career was failing at the time, and he took anything. And I think that maybe Scream for Help was his last movie. I mean, you could not put it together. I mean, it was just, and he cut all the dialogue. It was just unbelievably bad.
And did moments like that kind of push you to go, okay, I got to be in charge of my material?
Oh, that was it.
Yeah.
After that, I didn't want anybody to direct anything that I wrote. And so therefore I insisted on...
So he's your biggest influence.
Yeah.
Your biggest single influence is Michael Winner.
Well, but he was a lovely fellow.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm not in any way, because he took me to that lunch at that famous Hollywood restaurant where Orson Welles ate every day
Cafe, yeah.
Yeah, for free. But Orson was a famous.
Orson ate everything.
There was a famous chef. I can't remember now. And Michael was charming, funny, witty, and I think he was very rich. I think because of his family, and I don't remember, but I think his family had like the biggest dog food company or whatever in England.
That's strange for a gourmet gastronome. But he passed away last year, right? I believe
last year, very recently.
Yeah, it was recently. But there's some really entertaining stuff online. People should look up Michael Winner.
Yeah.
A little more fun.
Now, was it difficult to get to direct Fright Night, or were you in a position because of the success of Psycho 2
I was so hot as a writer
that you were able to...
Yeah, it was the expected next step. And I was very lucky because Guy McElwain, who was that moment big agent, but at that moment was head of Columbia, and I had met him previously in social situations through, there was a salon situation in Hollywood. Pamela Mason, does that name ring a bell with anybody? Pamela Mason? Pamela Mason was James Mason's wife. And her father owned Pine Tree, or one of the big studios. And they had moved over here. And if you look in Beverly Hills, there's Pamela Drive that led to her mansion. And she had bought the mansion that the great comedian Buster Keaton had built. And she would have get-togethers on Saturday or Sunday. And that was a mix of then contemporary Hollywood and old Hollywood, but it was a phenomenon. This was in the late 70s, a phenomenal gathering of people. And I meant Guy McElwain there because Guy was dating or friends with Pamela's daughter, Portland. Now, these people are no longer with us. But and I mentioned, and James Mason would come by, and it was everybody. It was, oh God, Freddie DeCordova, who produced for Johnny Carson for 25 years, Gregory Peck and his wife, God, generation before me, the Hollywood, oh God, producer agent's wife who was so big. It was a whole social group. What it was, and I wish I could. It was Betty Grable. It was that huge Hollywood agent, Greg Boutzer.
Were you intimidated in that situation, or were you pretty confident by then?
Oh no, I could hardly get my mouth open.
Yeah.
I mean, it was Milton Berle.
Uh-huh.
I mean, oh my God, it was everybody that I had grown up with. But it gave me I wish I could remember now. It gave the jazz musician who married all the beautiful women who was a son of a bitch. Because there were so many stories and so many scandals from those times. The woman who was the wife of the producer who was dead, her house was used by Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller to have their trysts in. Anyway, the stories were phenomenal. The great English critic who died of emphysema, who was a huge, cultural figure in high culture at that moment. I mean, it was everybody who was there. Jack Benny.
It's like the Hollywood Babylon book about the period before.
There was a value put on wit, as opposed to the cant and the slobbering that you get today. At least so it seemed to me when I was 27 and sitting in awe of all these people because I was friends.
Well, that could be a British mentality too, because I think the Brits and wit, James Mason and people like that makes sense to me.
It was high culture.
Yeah.
It wasn't for slackers. I mean, they were smart people. And I wish I could remember all the people that walked through those doors. She would have dinner parties, and you'd have 4 or 5 tables set up, and she in the dining room, because you'd have, I don't know how many people there was, like a fucking restaurant, and she would go from table to table as the hostess, so she would get a chance to talk to everybody. But it was a glittering crowd back when there was still a coherence to Beverly Hills and to the movie industry. And these are the people who ran it. These are the people who ran the Academy Awards.
And did any of that help you get?
No.
Okay.
So I was going to, by the time that like Fright Night evolved or Child's Play or things like this, had that completely dissolved? Was it a completely different system by then?
It had for me. Yeah, it had. I think they topped like in 1980 or very early 80s, but they were still very much in control through the 70s because all of De Palma, Spielberg, Scorsese, everybody was working for those people. I go back to Scorsese, to Boxcar Bertha, and were they or were they not really screwing on screen? Those were the scandals then. That was Barbara Siegel, which she called herself.
Barbara Hershey.
Yeah, she called herself for 5 minutes with Keith Carradine. Was it Keith or was David?
David, I think.
David, I think.
She was one of the just sexiest ladies.
Oh my God!
There's a Frank Perry movie called Last Summer where it's just.
Okay, well that's Bruce Davidson's real chance of stardom.
Yeah.
It's like when we talk about movies, if you can't put them in if you don't know where they are in the timeline of how the art is developing, you can't really evaluate them.
No, it's when people go, Citizen Kane's overrated, stupid. It's like, now. But if you had seen that the day it came out, there was nothing like it. Technical achievements, it was 10 years ahead of its time, maybe more.
Well, no, but nobody had ever shot ceilings before.
Yeah. Oh, and deep focus like that. But now you can look at a movie 50 years earlier and go, yeah, it's all right. It's kind of boring. Of course you can say that.
Well, they always come. They say, well, what was the movie that was most influential in your career? Well, it was Psycho. But
Can you tell us about how I love when people tell us, and we've had a couple of people because of Rob tell us where they were when they first saw it. Just that first screening of Psycho for you.
I was in high school. I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I washed it between my fingers and hiding under the seat. But I knew that I was seeing montage and cutting that I had never seen before, because I grew up with genre. I grew up with AIP and with Hammer. And that was heavily saturated, period, horror.
Yeah.
And very slow moving, proscenium arch.
Very slow.
But proscenium arch in terms of how they framed it. It had a big wide shot.
It was very theatrical in that regard, and they would have set pieces, and the camera might rove around the set, but it would always return to the original point.
But you'd never seen.
Probably lack of coverage. They probably didn't have the money, especially AIP.
Well, but historically, I feel like I should become a teacher. but historically, you're losing it now with digital. But film was very, very expensive. So you controlled the number of takes you did unless you were William Wyler, who was famous for multiple takes, just like the guy with Gone Girl now. Fincher is famous now for multiple takes, but you were also valued by how few setups you did to get the coverage that was necessary to cut it together, because it was so damn expensive, and that forced a sense of composition. So one of the valued parts of film was how you compose the shot. Now you have digital, where you're talking about cards, and it doesn't cost anything, so they don't even do takes anymore. They call them resets, and they just let the card keep running.
And the frame is no longer important because you're shooting on such a high K that you could shoot a general shot of this and then decide
Crop
on a
it out.
close-up.
Do that all the
And
time.
I heard Werner Herzog talk about it, and he said that's the death of cinema for him, was when you're not framing your shots anymore, then who cares? Like if you're not using your eye, and I completely agree.
He's right.
It's like that's part of the art of where you place a camera. And
You've been working on my films before where you're like, oh, let's just crop in a little bit here. I know you have.
No, but maybe because if it wasn't done right.
No,
but no, truly, I think the art is where you put the camera.
When Elric and I have worked on films together, we definitely plan the frame while we're there, but there's definitely been times when we've been like editing and we're like, let's just close.
No,
in
you can
a
fix a
bit.
lot of things in post, but you don't want to shoot a movie.
Option.
I think they were talking about Tintin and how it just didn't matter where the camera, it's just capturing stuff. And then later on, you figure out what the movie is. And that to me is just like it kills anything that gets me excited about the idea of trying to construct, which is what it goes back to Polanski. More than any director, Hitchcock's another one. But when you see Polanski, and people always use Rosemary Baby, it's just his movies are literally made in compositions.
Yes,
more than almost any director. Without that, I don't know if there's any tension. I think what he is constructing is just that you're constantly trying to figure out.
Go look at his Macbeth.
Oh yeah, that just got re-released.
If you want to see Polanski doing composition, look at his Macbeth.
And at his angriest, because that came right after. And he lost his wife. So there's a lot of blood in that film for a reason. He said he wanted it to feel like Manson murders.
But what you just said, you are 300% right. The art of composition is being lost. The art of having to be judicious in how much you shoot is being lost because of digital, and also your depth of focus. Because now, and I forget what it's called, but now you can go in the computer afterwards and choose what you want to focus on with your electronic pencil, and so you can throw the depth of field wherever you want. So
and did you find there's also a bit of a tension between the director and the actors, knowing that it's film and knowing that the cost and knowing that there's this inherent thing, whereas now it's just like even actors know, we can do it a million, we'll get it right eventually, because there's no money. I mean, it really doesn't cost. The only thing that still costs money is time now. It still costs time. Rent a camera and to shoot, but. I always think that the actors there's something about that tension of film. I don't know.
I mean, everybody had to be on their game and do the work.
Everyone has to be at their best for that little period of time.
Or money to futz around when it came to shooting on film and stuff.
But all those, everything you're saying, Elric, is true.
No. But
I've wanted to hear that from somebody for a very long time, Tom, and you just made my
He's validated.
No, but I mean, if you
really love cinema, that's
Well, but what you get a shaky cam.
Yeah.
I mean, well, who can't handhold a Tinker Toy camera, for Christ's sake?
Right.
Where's the art in that?
Can we put that quote on the new VHS movie?
You know?
Sure.
But that's definitely become the style, because I mean, like, I was noticing it in Starry Eyes, and it didn't bother me as much in Starry Eyes, but the whole kind of, over the shoulder camera, or not over the shoulder, but the
handheld
camera,
and different.
the handheld camera moving
Not always
about
shaky
the
cam,
set.
but I think you're really right. I think people will just hold it, and it looks kind of realistic. I think they think it's fluid. But it has changed it, because there is less of a need to actually have to figure out how you construct a scene, how that shot relates to the next shot. That relates, like Hitchcock had that approaching pattern in Psycho, where if you look at the scene with the birds stuffed and him and Marion talking, it starts wide, it goes to a medium, it goes to a close-up, and it never comes back out. When it's on a close-up, he stands up and walks across the room in a close-up and leaves. And that was called this, approaching pattern of editing, because it got you closer. If nowadays we just ping pong all over the place, MTV and Transformers.
And it's weird the way that my eyes have adjusted. I assume that's this way with everybody, because I remember a short time during the mid 2000s where I was very annoyed by shaky cam, and I'd be like, God damn it, just put it on a tripod. They're not expensive. Just go buy a fucking tripod.
And now you get used to it.
Now I'm kind of like, I can
because of
dig
reality
it.
TV, I think
I
is
can
a big
handle
part
it
of
now.
it.
I can't
Reality
handle
TV.
it in like As Above, So Below. That was a little intense, but
I got a question about just where did you learn, besides theater, where did you learn, to direct? I mean, that's a big deal to go from writing to suddenly you're making Fright Night. Who did you pick up the most from working with along the way, or was it just everything?
I think it was everything. It was scene study classes, but it was also doing soaps for years, because I made a living for about 4 years in New York doing soap operas. And so putting scenes on their feet and blocking them for camera and knowing how to make them work, well, that's the hard part. But at least blocking them so you could shoot the damn things became second nature. So I think I learned a lot of the technical stuff from acting. But to go back to what we're talking about with framing or shot selection, it's more complicated. It's one of the 4 or 5 languages of film is your shot selection, your framing. You're looking for something. You can direct the eye with how you cut and with how you frame. So you have to decide on what the values are in each individual scene. And then you're also looking for visual metaphors for the story or your theme. And so it's sort of easy now in retrospect, but for Fright Night, you've got a vampire. And you got to remember, when I did Fright Night, vampires were dead and everybody thought I was mad, because the Dracula had been a huge failure, and The Farce, Love at First Bite was the last vampire film before Fright Night. And farce is the indication of the exhaustion of a genre,
Right.
which you can also apply to the last sequels of Child's Play. When they start making, when Chucky becomes funny, it means that really there's no danger left, and you're down to the genre's exhausted.
see, that's what I've always had that theory as well, but it didn't fly with zombies. I was completely blown, because I said,
but they die for a while.
I said as soon as Shaun of the Dead and Warm Bodies was it for me. I said, okay, we've now made fun. Zombies are funny. We can move on, and it kept going.
See, but now we're crossing mediums. That's the difference. Where if we were talking in cycles of film, that's different. But then Walking Dead took off on TV.
So I guess that's where it went. Because I mean, we didn't see too many scary zombie films. After that point.
Have there been many zombie movies since then?
No, I mean, like Warm Bodies still caps it for me. Like as soon as that happened, we're not going to see a lot more zombie films.
And the
but
reality
it
is,
did shift
Walking
over
Dead
to
is a mixture of
television.
Romero's world, but it's also actually the zombies are very little to do with
It's
it.
a drama.
Every time I
It's
watch
like
it,
a
I'm
soap
really
opera.
never thinking about the zombies. I'm thinking about who the character is, and there's usually a villain within the characters. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's a world view.
Let me throw out that and we probably, I mean, everybody said this, but the horror reflects its time or what's going on in society. And dystopia fiction, young adult YA fiction, has been the cat's meow for 10, 15 years. So zombies have become the perfect genre to reflect the unease and anxiety in society, which has now been going on since 9/11 nonstop.
Yeah.
And God, I mean, if Ebola isn't If zombies aren't a metaphor for Ebola, what is?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I remember, I think Joe Dante mentioned he also thought it had a lot to do with the unemployment. When we had the large people just shambling around, not knowing what to do with their time, unemployed.
Very much.
But I mean, but that's that's the Firestarter movies. It's so overwhelming at this point. It's become a cliche. If I see another dystopian movie, Maze Runners or whatever, I'm going to scream.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I'm saying is zombies fit in perfectly with that, because Night of the Living Dead, 1968, that really came off of I Am Legend. And this is where you have to have a historical sense of it. The real genius is
Richard Matheson.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, great writer
he created them.
Yeah.
I mean that I Am Legend is the first zombie that I know of.
Yeah, there's zombie vampire. There's some weird hybrid version of it. Yeah.
Well, you had Val Lewis late I Walk with a Zombie.
I Walk with a Zombie.
Yeah, White Zombie I think was one of the first.
Yeah, but they're late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah. And I mean, the original one.
Yeah.
They're different.
Well, they're all very cultural based, because the original one is I think it was from a book called This Magic Island, and it was all about Haiti.
Yes.
And if I'm remembering my history right, it was from that book, and that book was a very kind of fictionalized portrayal of one man's trip to Haiti.
But I Am Legend is what Romero took.
That's what most people know zombies as.
That's right. And that gave Night of the Living Dead is 68 to now 2004. I'm Not Good Enough, but that's 40-some years. So 40-some years from when it first came out and was excoriated by the critics, Night of the Living Dead, and 45 years later...
14.9 million watched the new episode.
It is the number one
week.
TV show.
Yep.
So it's taken 40-some years for zombies to permeate the culture, where it's moved into mass culture.
Well, let's look at vampires with Twilight. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like it goes through these processes and then became the most popular movie for a while.
And now it's exhausted.
Exactly. Yeah. Twilight was also the deathgasm.
The end of it.
Yeah.
Deathgasm.
I just coined that. I think that was the deathgasm of the. But yeah, let's go back to your. So you were pitching an uphill battle. Making a horror comedy with vampires, no less. But it also is meta. It's self-referential. So, you are putting your twist on it.
And I always loved that it was actually about kind of the aging horror host, because that was when those horror hosts had been big in the 60s and 70s.
That's what I grew up with.
Yeah,
that's what I grew up with.
remember seeing them when I was a kid. Like we had them in D.C. We had them. There was one out of Richmond, Virginia.
Stagger Lee, Vampira. Yeah.
But by the time I was a kid, they were all very aging, and it was watching these old men in these kind of dusty costumes on your public access channel. So I remembered connecting with that.
But you knew what I was writing about.
Yeah, completely. Even, because I remember seeing Fright Night when I was still in elementary school, but I remembered associating it to that, dusty old man on cable access.
Well, you even put the line in the movie where he's Peter Vincent's getting fired, and it's like all these kids want to see is a masked maniac or so along those
hacking
lines.
up virgins.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true.
Now, having gotten to know you over the years and looking in retrospect between your films before and after, I feel like Fright Night is definitely by far the most you, the most 100% you in terms of your sensibilities, things you like. I assume it's the one that everything went right on for the most part. I mean, I haven't really heard you tell too many stories on Fright Night.
Well, they went right on Child's Play as far as the making of the film, and that Child's Play is the film that I wrote and that I wanted to make. Mm-hmm. So that Fright Night, yes, definitely, because I had total control.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's the one is it safe to say it's the one closest to you and your heart personally?
But Psycho 2 was a perfect film.
Yeah.
But then there were disasters like Scream for Help. Mm-hmm. And then there are the ones that nobody ever talks about, like The Temp, which is
I really like The Temp.
Yeah.
Well, that film was recut on me by Stanley Jaffe, who was the head of Columbia. Mm-hmm. And there is a terrific film on the cutting room floor. They took out all the horror touches. Mm-hmm. It's just horrible.
What was it? What was going on at the time that they felt? Because usually what happens is some other movie's a big hit, and they decide, well, we need to reshape our movie to be like that.
They thought, you're partially right. They thought because of Stanley Jaffe, because it got good test scores, not great. And because they had had a huge hit with Fatal Attraction by changing the ending,
That's it.
they thought that they could change the ending. And they put this abortion on at the end of the temp, which was horrible. And once again, horror is the bastard child. It's déclassé. It's the Academy, and those people look down in the genre. So all the horror touches that I had in it, and I had a lot visually for the deaths, they took them all out, and they went more straight, homogenized movie thriller. What you got was some very good acting scenes.
Yeah.
That's what you got.
I just remember, I thought it was like good, I don't want to use the word campy, but that kind of story, fun. It was Lara Flamboyant, right? And I thought it was 6, but I also saw it probably at 14. So to me, that was probably really sexy at 14, even if it was neutered for TV. I'm not sure.
But it was neutered. It was neutered for the distribution.
Yeah.
And this is where politics screw you up, and nobody would have talked about it, but Stanley Jaffe no longer has been out of Columbia for a long time. His family owned a huge chunk of it. The story that I got was that he hated the guy who gave me the go-ahead, who was a fan of mine, who was the huge TV legend, who died of brain cancer, was a wonderful, lovely, lovely man. And now I can't think of his name.
But the amount what you're about to say is funny, because the amount of people I've met out here whose story goes the same way. When their film got screwed up, it's because whoever greenlit it and believed in them at some point died or got fired.
He got fired.
And somebody replaced them who don't know anything about the project. Dave Parker, Darren Bousman.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot of stories where the exact thing has happened to them.
That's what. But the guy who got forced out was famous. He was the maven of television, and Jesus, and just a lovely, lovely man. I mean, so many power players in Hollywood are not. This guy really was warm and human, and I saw him when he was dying, actually, in Beverly Hills Hotel in the Polo Lounge, and I think he was wearing a wig, because he'd lost so much of his hair, but he was just a terrific guy. Anyway, he lost a fight with Stanley Jaffe, and Stanley hated him. And so Stanley, I always felt, or what I heard was Stanley crapped all over the movie because he was trying to improve the movie to show how bad this other guy was at putting it into production.
Is that the worst you've had on terms of, not personally, but just a film of yours being affected?
No, Thinner, the ending got crapped on. And I don't have an explanation for that, because Thinner was a very good film. In the end, it's the one example I've had where the ending did not work. The ending that I had on there was the ending from the book, was the ending I should have left on there, and the studio forced me to take it off and put the little Philip ending that's on there now.
But everyone ate the pie, right, and died.
Well, what I had was, his wife is banging the doctor. He finds out about it, so he's taken the poison. He's gotten the poison out of his system, and he's put it into the pie.
Right.
And so he wants vengeance on the doctor who's sleeping with his wife while he's been sick. And so he knows that his wife gets up in the morning and will have something to eat before he gets up. So he takes the poison pie and he puts it right where she'll find it. So he gets up in the morning and he's thin again. He's healthy.
Yeah.
And he comes down cheerful because he expects his wife to have eaten the pie and be dying or dead. And he walks in, and the one person he loves in his whole life is his 17-year-old daughter. And she's eaten a piece of the pie.
So it's a little more like The Mist.
And what he does, it breaks his heart, and you see him die there when he realizes it. And he says, "Good, have a wonderful day, dear," to his daughter, and she leaves. And he spent the entire movie getting rid of the gypsy curse and getting rid of the pie. He cuts himself a piece of the pie and he eats it.
Is that different from the one that's actually in the movie?
That's the ending that I shot
of the
How
book.
is that different from, because that's the one that I remember.
No, it's not the ending of the movie, because the audience A, didn't understand it, and B, hated it.
Because the daughter eats a piece of the pie at the ending of the actual movie version, correct?
My memory is that what I did and was forced to do was the lawyer who had been sleeping with his wife shows up, and Billy invites the lawyer in, and you know he's going to feed a piece of the pie to the lawyer.
Like an audience wink ending.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the ending that I had on there was the bitter bit ending. But this goes to either I didn't make the film right, or you just can't take a really bitter ending and put it on a film for a popular audience. I never was sure, because I think what happened was I thought Robert John Burks did such a good job as Billy that the audience was rooting for him to get rid of the curse and to have a happy ending. They wanted a happy ending. And that was not what the movie was. The movie was moral jellyfish gets squished at the end, and the audience just did not want that. And so, and
that's the question: who the audience is, right? Like your horror audience would have gone with it, but your general audience
in Paramus, New Jersey, they weren't happy with it.
Yeah, right.
So,
exactly.
And
his performance is really great. And then he had gotten a lot of heat from RoboCop 3, he's in Dust Devil, and he's in a lot of Hal Hartley movies where he's incredible.
Yep.
No one knows him from that, but he's really a great actor. Yep. But I remember thinking Thinner was like a really great performance. And you don't need to say vengeance anymore. You just say thinner. Yeah. I use that word for vengeance now. It's thinner.
What was the third one? This was a question I asked at Trivia Night, and I couldn't even remember.
Third Stephen King edition?
The third thing. It was Thinner. The second guy was Lizard. And then what was the third guy?
Pizza Face.
Pizza Face.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever actually
said
what the gypsy was taught.
He talked to him through a door.
Yeah.
And so you never saw it. This is the truth of how we went over, or they had money withdrawn. I don't know what, but while I was shooting, I got an insane amount of pressure from the studio, which then was Spelling International, to cut. And they made me cut the effects, and which was the stupidest thing they could have done.
Because in the book, he's like pretty much melting. If I remember correctly, the third guy is like pretty much like melting onto the floor. And in the movie, it's really quick. It's like he talks to him through a door.
Yeah. But you never saw that. And also the Lizard Man, which was the judge, I played that off screen too, because they forced me to cut. So,
it's hard on a filmmaker,
gory,
isn't it?
Tom. That's it. You're just too gory.
But it's tough because you're the one who's going to be held responsible through time for anything like that, right? Like, why didn't he show the pizza guy? Yeah. No one thinks about the studio behind who forced you to
pizza guy.
Budget.
Well, I go to John Ford.
Uh-huh.
John Ford said he never took his name off of any of them, even when he hated what the studios did. And so I've always felt that way about everything that I did.
Yeah, but it also changed how he shot his movies, because John Ford, when he first started, shot coverage, and one day they re-edited his movie totally differently, and he's like, what the hell? After that, he no longer shot coverage. He shot 2 shots, and that's the movie. And then he went in and edited it.
No, he did more than that. Yeah. He would do a master. He'd do the 4 or 5 sentences that you needed to get into the scene. He'd cut, and he'd have them come out to the 5 or 6 lines at the very end. Yeah. And he'd cut out the entire middle of the master. You could only use the master for the beginning and the end.
Mm-hmm.
No, and it's really smart, because it was in a system where editors were taking over.
Yeah, but you really, really have to know what you're doing
to pull that up.
Yeah.
To do that. And you said, you really have to know what you're doing. You said earlier, or you did, about how because of digital you have the multiplicity of shots now, because it's so easy to do setups. Well, so you get into the Michael Bay, 2-second shots. Mm-hmm. So you don't even have any kind of orientation, and it doesn't matter because it's coming at you so quickly and it's so loud. So that's why so much of the traditional language of film has been lost. You were saying that an hour ago, but you're right.
But it's about as fun as a crazy person screaming at you.
Well, but but as long as it makes those huge grosses, what happens is that.
But it's all marketing, because it means they've marketed it correctly, so everyone has gone the first weekend and it's made a ton of money. No one's going back the second weekend. No, there's nothing fun about Transformers. I'll never defend that.
Godzilla, because I think Godzilla has the
I'm fine
same
with
thing.
Godzilla.
I think Godzilla has the same thing.
Not the aesthetic, though. Where it's,
No. But it's, big budget marketing.
Yeah.
And because of the setup, it's hard to, there's little geography in that film.
Right.
Like you don't always know where you are or where the camera's pointed or how it relates.
But Michael Bay is another level of that.
Yeah, no.
Some people like it. I just, it doesn't interest me.
I have a few fan questions that people wrote in for you, but before that,
this is a more serious conversation than usual.
No. Actually, you'd be surprised. So we fluctuate.
Standard.
Well, no, but I'm talking like this because you're all wonderful. I've known all of you for a long time, and I mean, for those out in the listening audience, the people at the table are extremely knowledgeable and tasteful about film.
Wow, we've never had a guest say
yes.
that about us. I'll take it.
You're dealing with some people who are very, very, very knowledgeable here.
No, it's exciting to see a different perspective because there are interviews out there I'm sure people can find where you're just going to talk about everything about Child's Play.
And
then I still want to hear some Child's Play stuff.
Because
I do love Child's Play.
Well, what you do is you go into these things, you try to be positive all the time because you don't want people to think that you're sour, disappointed, and bitter.
Right.
Even though, if you
I've had this conversation with you before because I know Tom and I always get put on these filmmaking panels together. Like anytime they do film fests around LA, I swear I've been on more panels with you than anybody else. Yeah. Like Holly Shorts we were on together and we were on one at Kamikaze. And I remember I've had discussions with you about how people will be in the audience and ask us about, how do I get a film made in Hollywood? And you balance back and forth between it's impossible. Don't even try. It's just, why the fuck would you want to do that? And it's so easy now because you can just get your own camera and do it.
Well, you want to be if I'm in a good mood, I want to be encouraging. I mean, you can't let your bitterness and bile.
Yeah.
Is Hollywood ageist now?
Yeah, sure. Has been all my life.
Because even I know you, Carpenter, and a lot of great directors who it's so much harder for them to go back to it just because the kind of people greenlighting things are so much younger now. But I don't know, from your perspective.
I think it's always been that way. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it didn't bother me when I was 25.
Right, yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, I remember having these conversations with Robert Culp. Because anyway,
the greatest American heroes.
Yeah.
Well, but his competition was Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
So so when I was young and looking at movie stars, Culp and McQueen were battling it out with TV series westerns on TV. I remember talking to him about the JFK movie, PT 143. They made a guy, a movie celebrating JFK after he got elected. Warner Brothers did. It was called PT, but after his boat that got shot down. Anyway, I can't remember. But some famous director got thrown off of that by Warner Brothers, and Bob Culp was telling me about it. And and they brought in this other guy, this young guy. So we had discussions about that, and he was. Of course, he was bitter about that. And of course, he was like 83 or 84 before he died. It's just,
But I mean, I've even seen people like Stuart Gordon struggle to get it to find money now. Whereas at a period, they just made movie every couple of years. You're making a movie. Now it seems like they really have to fight to try to even make an independent budgeted film.
Is that ageist or is that just the industry now? Because
I don't know.
I feel like
everyone
everyone
seem to be making movies a lot
it's
easier.
It's definitely a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And I can give you a clear example off air.
Okay. Fair enough.
That really
I'll
bothered
take
me.
it.
But really quickly before we go to fan questions,
they're moving into television. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
The two things I wanted to bring up is number one, because you mentioned Thinner, and obviously you also did the Langoliers, and you're currently
Langoliers was a very happy experience, except I had no money. But
right. And now you're adapting the 10 O'Clock People.
Yeah.
I mean, from your perspective, what's it like to be on the phone with Stephen King and tackle his material? Because most of your material before that, for the most part, is original and it's yours. But when you're dealing with somebody who is undoubtedly a master at his craft, and you're dealing with his material, is that intimidating at all? Is he pretty supportive?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had. I don't have anything bad to say. I only have good things to say about him. I mean, every experience I've had with him is he's been very, very supportive. He's a lovely guy. He's, you know, I don't get any sense of ego or anything. I mean, you know, he's a high school English teacher. I mean, you know, that's what he was.
Yeah.
You know, and he still has I've always thought he still had a lot of that in him, but I've known him now for 20 some years. Mick knows him. Mick Garris knows him better than I do.
Right.
He's you know, he's our Charles Dickens. The amazing thing about him is is how prolific he is, and and his maintenance of quality. I mean, he's, you know, I mean, some of the short stories are still mind blowing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I could get, if I had to reach for being critical. I mean, he's written some books that, you know, that are you could use an editor on, and some of the stuff isn't as good as. But I mean, you know, you're gonna have ups and downs. How long's he been at it? Since he was 12 or 13?
I mean, and he keeps cranking out.
Well, and
so
a
much
period where you
material.
survive an amazing, you know, a crash that could have ended things.
Yeah,
And
Well,
yeah,
that,
that's true.
but there's the compulsiveness. I never forgot. I used him in a cameo on Langoliers, and he was close enough. I shot that at Bangor International Airport, and it was close enough that he rode his motorcycle down, and he was a nervous wreck because he was there and he was not back in his study at his word processor. I mean, he was frantic.
Wow.
That he wasn't getting out the 2,000 words a day. So what I don't know is what the
God, I wish I had that problem.
That's 8 pages.
well, no, but 2,000 words, 250 words per page. I mean, what is that? Like 8 pages a day.
8 pages a day.
But I mean the compulsiveness. I mean, I stand in awe of the volume of material and the quality. And I've always found him very, very supportive. You know, he asked me to do 10 o'clock people. You know, I mean, I'm not like, I've never sat down, I've had dinner with him, but I mean, I've never sat down and had, you know, one of those conversations where you bare your soul or anything like that. But I mean, he's always seemed like a very nice, it's going to sound strange, but like a regular guy almost.
Do you have a favorite film adaptation besides yours of his work that you thought somebody really understood King?
Well,
cinematically,
his best book is probably The Stand.
Yeah.
I mean, but then again, you have to have a historical perspective, because when that came out, was it 77, 78, something like that? I mean, nobody had ever done that before. I mean, so, you know, and I thought he lost it it got too diffused in Roland the Gunslinger series. It got too much. It lost because you get too multiplicity of characters. Same thing that happens with Game of Thrones. You lose, you can't stay with the story because the story becomes too diffused. But that did not happen in The Stand, and that's probably his.
But in terms of films that you've seen of his work, was there a film that you thought, like, did you like The Dead Zone, or did you, you know, we know how he feels about Shining.
Well, there've been so many good ones. You know, The Dead Zone's terrific, but I mean, probably the best film by Canadian. Who's the director?
David Cronenberg.
Cronenberg is probably The Fly.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, The Fly is really a brilliant film. There have been a number of. I mean, the first Carrie was a mind blower. I mean, that performance by Sissy Spacek is just, you know, it's because it's what Tony did in Psycho 2. It's both horrifying and moving at the same time. You know, you find yourself rooting for a murderess, or you find yourself rooting for a serial murderer in Psycho 2, and the to get to the heart of it, to the pathos of it, you know, the tragedy of the character. That's extraordinary. But those are just a couple. And Misery.
Misery's got to be one of my favorites of the film adaptations by far.
I mean, you know, so I mean, he's done so much good, and you know, and there's been stuff that's crap too. But I mean, but who hasn't, and I have too.
Yeah.
I mean, Henry Farrell, who was one of my mentors, Henry Farrell wrote Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Henry said you just have to keep getting up there and doing it, and then one day somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, You know that thing that just came out? That was just wonderful. And you didn't even realize it. I mean, so, you know, so if you get better, you go in and out because life's in and out. I mean, you just have to keep after it. I burned out. I've been blocked. I haven't been able to write. I've been desperate. I've been depressed. I've been suicidal. I've been joyous. I've been happy. I've had great sex. I've had terrible sex. But I mean that's life.
You lived.
I mean,
I mean, that's film industry. I think that's everybody.
Some movies have been better than fucking.
Right.
And some of them I wish I had been fucking. Right.
Yes.
So
one of our funny you mentioned it because one of our Twitter questions was they wanted you to expand on the good sex. Whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable. I don't want to make you uncomfortable.
No, I mean the one last thing I wanted to bring up before we just have a few quick questions, but I've talked to you before. After you did Fright Night, obviously you and Roddy McDowall became friends, and you would tell me that he would always frequently host parties.
Yes,
and that you learned so much about film history just from him, just from talking to him.
Oh, he was. Roddy used to say that Hollywood had no history. Mm-hmm. It's Ecclesiastes. All is vanity, all is dust. So no matter how lauded you are in the moment, it's a river that keeps flowing. Mm-hmm. And if you're not of the moment, then you are really completely forgotten. And I can tell you that because all those people who had Academy Award nominated films or even Academy Award winners, how many do you remember now? Mm-hmm. And I could put an edge on that because I've had so many friends that have been highly respected filmmakers over the years, and I always felt that to some degree I was looked down on. Inferiority complex because my love has been genre oriented. Really, I mean, I don't thrillers, but I've never really, prestige dramas. I mean, I can, no, I can't. I fall asleep. Unless you have something maybe extraordinary, but I think of all those people I know and all the excitement and all the Academy Award nominees and BAFTA parties I've been to, and nobody remembers the films. And I'm enormously pleased that a couple of the ones that I did entered into the popular culture so deeply that I really feel that they will be remembered for a time. Certainly not for a long time, probably, but films tend to last because they have an economic value. So the system keeps getting them out there. But we were talking about Cloak and Dagger, which 15 years ago or 20 years ago was a huge film, on cable and everything, and now is forgotten because it's not in rotation. So you don't know, but I mean, I feel like Fright Night and Child's Play, those films will go on for a number of generations after I'm gone.
I mean, Child's Play is something I often talked about on here about Nightmare on Elm Street. I feel exactly the same about Child's Play, that film alone without sequels is a very different film. Yeah, I think it's an amazing thriller. I mean, the moment where the mother sees that there's no batteries in this doll, that's as good as thrillers have ever gone, moments like that. But what gets forgotten once these characters become a cartoon and become satire, just like Freddy, it dissipates a little power of the original. But if you see that movie again as its own movie, without the character becoming a wisecrack. In all honesty, I was never a Chucky person except the first film. Maybe a little bit in the second because he was still scary at least. But at a certain point, I'm just not interested in the comic side of these characters. Same with Freddy Krueger. It's fun. Robert Englund's fun. But the first film's terrifying. Mm-hmm. And that's what I signed up for. And it's fascinating.
The first Nightmare on Elm Street.
First Nightmare and Chucky. I think they're very similar in the same way, though, because the Chucky doll, because I was probably 10 or something.
Oh, yeah.
I'm similar, a little older than the kid, but you really feel for the kid. It's one of the best horror films about a kid, I think, because it's his friend. Completely. It's his doll. It's the thing he's excited about.
And it was topical at the time because it was right when they had My Buddy, and then there was also Kid's Sister and Cricket and Teddy Ruxpin. And there was all of this, that was the trend in toys because I had Teddy Ruxpin and Cabbage Patch and Cricket.
The original film was named Blood Buddy.
Oh, so it's
And-
based off My
Blood
Buddy.
Well, the original script was more like an episode of Twilight Zone. It was about a kid who an unhappy little boy who made the doll a blood buddy.
Like the Talking Tina.
Like Talking Tina, yeah. And then whenever the little boy would fall asleep, the doll would get up and kill his teacher, his dentist, and eventually at the end, I think it went after his mother. But there was no antagonist, and there was no Charles Lee Ray. There was no Lakeside Strangler. So you felt there was nobody to sympathize with or like. So I always thought what made my script so strong was that I made the boy an innocent, and I put him in real danger by creating Charles Lee Ray and putting the soul of a serial murderer inside a doll. And it was topical because it was at those moments was the first time you'd had an electronic chip inside of a doll. So you never knew what the damn thing was going to say.
Yeah, because you would, I remember with my Teddy Ruxpin, because it actually had like facial expressions and its eyes moved around and it blinked. And same thing, I had that, hi, I'm Cricket doll. And it was the same thing where you would put in these tapes and it would respond and react and ask you questions.
I originally had him called Buddy, but then Standards and Practices wouldn't let me use it because of My Buddy.
My Buddy.
And I still
My
have...
Buddy. I remember the theme song from the cartoon.
I still have the Buddy doll at home that I used as an example of what I wanted with the doll. I took the My Buddy doll body, I took the head off and put Raggedy Andy on top of the My Buddy doll and told the effects guy that I wanted that coloring and freckles. And so there was a...
It looked like a ginger.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah, why? That's where all the ginger hate comes from. You did it. You made redheads evil.
Well, but I did that with Evil Ed.
That's true.
When
True.
He wears that
That's
wig.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom Holland. Thanks. Now I know what I always made fun of.
That was a very carefully structured script because it has visual set pieces that rise. And if you look at that sequence that you mentioned where she finds out there are no batteries in it, that thing must go for 10, 12 minutes because it starts with her starting to throw the doll away. And I think she picks up it's been a while now.
Yeah, it's the box.
She picks up the box and the batteries fall out.
Yeah.
And oh shit. And then she goes in and she picks up a doll and turns it over and opens up the back.
And the head.
And the back's empty, no batteries, and the head turns.
It rotates.
Yeah.
Okay? Then she drops it.
And it goes right
And
into
it
the
goes
couch.
underneath the couch. And then she goes down and she looks underneath the couch. So you're building, you've gone from the kitchen to the dining room to under the couch, and she lifts it up, and finally she's about ready to throw it into the fire. And Chucky finally comes alive, but it builds and it builds and it builds.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like if you look at where the babysitter gets struck in the head, and all you see is the hammer hitting. But I must have had 12 different cuts of her going out the window. She staggers back. I'm on the feet. I'm on the fingers, trying to find some purchase or way to stop it. You know, I'm on her face as she goes. You know, so that's Hitchcock. That's where I learned that. Anyway, you know, I mean, those are suspense sequences, and the rule of thumb for that kind of movie was you want at least 4 or 5 visual suspense sequences where the story is moving forward with very, very little dialogue, and you're looking, I don't know, is it horror? But you're looking for rising suspense because that's what, you know,
Well, those are considered horror. I mean, from an academic theorist point, you would consider those like your sex scenes in a horror movie. So it's true. No, that's how they kind of equate it. That's the
build
sex
up
scene
before the stab.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's a very well structured movie. And I should mention that Tom did a commentary for Child's Play that we put on Icons of Fright for free. Where you get pretty in depth about the whole thing, so it's worth. I'll repost it
because I'm going to plead ignorant. I'm not going to ask you to talk about negative experiences so much, but I am curious. Did you have a greater picture if that film had been successful, and obviously it was, where you would have taken the story? Like, had you thought beyond that film, or was it just this is just the world of that movie.
Did you already have a sequel set?
I did everything I could to kill that damn doll off at the end. I ripped it apart. I burned it. I tore its head off. And I shot it through the heart.
Not good enough.
And not good enough.
You and John Carpenter both, buddy.
All the cards kept coming back. Well, you've obviously set it up for a sequel.
Yeah.
You know, no. I mean, yes, I did have ideas, but I don't remember because I didn't I turned down the remake. I turned down the sequel because I thought the script was so horrendous.
They didn't give you the option to write it?
No, they didn't. But it was like watching paint dry when I read it. And I've always had the sequel to Child's Play, and I lost control of that. And they've just done one god-awful movie after another. You know, I mean, Herb did just a terrible job because he was too cheap to pay Chris Sarandon. So he did Fright Night 2, which was just dreadful.
Tommy Lee Wallace.
Yeah.
People know my love of Tommy Lee Wallace.
Well, I love Tommy. He's a lovely, lovely man.
And there are some great creatures in there. So let's
anyway,
defend the creatures.
But then they did that remake, which, you know, I mean, they did everything so well, so they forgot the heart and the humor. But outside of those two things, it was terrific. And then they did Fox did a direct-to-DVD, you know, for Fright Night. You know,
Fright Night 2.
Fright Night 2, the second Fright Night 2.
I've never seen that.
The story should be, and I have never been able to get the rights to do it, but Charlie should return to that house as an adult with his two children.
You just brought up one of the things I wanted to bring. Do you remember this? The comic book thing that we were thinking about that one time?
No.
Here's what happened. I
Flashback.
What happened was years ago, we did the big reunion in Texas, which is one of the first times that the whole cast was there.
That was the first time.
And the most interesting thing you mentioned during the panel, which I took very note of, is that the characters are all yours. You still maintain the characters and the rights to it. So if you wanted to do, say, a comic book or something along those lines, you were able to do that. It's just that the movie rights were a different story.
I have the novel rights and I have the rights to plays and musical comedies.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Well, if the remake had been successful, I could have gotten it set up as a musical comedy, but it was not. It was not successful. So
okay, but after that, you and I hashed out a few ideas, and I sent you an outline that you rewrote as a potential. Because what happened was right after that panel in Texas, and this is going back several years, there was some horror properties in comic books. Like I think somebody was doing the Halloween comic books. I can't remember what company it was.
Sounds right.
But yeah, we were flirting with this idea. You were going to write it, of course. I was just kind of throwing ideas at you of what I wanted to see as a fan in terms of Charlie marrying his high school sweetheart, Amy, returning back to the house, which he inherits from his wife, and then...
From his mother.
From his mother, that's what I meant. And then kind of the whole thing happening all over again, but...
Well, I want him to have, at least the last time I thought of it, I wanted him to have his own kids.
Yes.
And the kids are looking out the window at the house next door, and who they see, of course, is Evil Ed.
Right.
And Evil Ed's there trying to reconstitute and revive Jerry Dandridge.
Yep. It's totally all it.
And Charlie, of course, doesn't believe his kids any more than his mother believed him.
Right.
But I mean, the joy of that would be getting that original cast back together again, too.
Right.
Because all those actors, they're wonderful people.
Yeah.
Bill and Evil Ed and and Amy, and they're just lovely, lovely people and great actors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Excellent.
Questions?
You
quick?
have your questions.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go really quick through these. I had two different people, Dan Gorman and Dan Dominguez, asking about The Beast Within. How you feel about the if there was anything more you could talk about the script, how you feel about the final film, etc. I know you've kind of covered this, but I think what I think is interesting is when we did the commentary for The Beast Within Blu-ray, kind of your reinterest in the material again. I
tried. I went to MGM very recently and tried to get the rights
to remake it.
Yes, and they would not give me the rights.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And since then, I've learned that just MGM is apparently extremely difficult. I had it set up for $4.2 million in Rhode Island. I had everything ready to go.
Oh wow! Would you have directed it?
Yes, and I had taken the script and I'd rewritten the script, and I thought I had a terrific script because once again, a lot of what I wrote in The Beast Within, they were not able to do then. But now they could, because I had the cicadas.
Right.
You know, and they just cut the cicadas out of that script because they didn't know how to do it. You know, so what are you going to do? The cicadas were a visual metaphor for what was happening to Michael. He was changing, and you know, it was 17 years coming back.
I got a thing about bug films, so I wish you would have put the cicadas in.
Paul Lasada, my old Amoeba coworker, he just wanted to ask, in terms of your direction in filmmaking, what do you give most attention to as a director on set, or does that change from film to film? Meaning, are you more into talking to the actors and talking about performance, or working with the DP? Like, what's the main thing that you focus on when you're on set directing?
All of it, because you have dialogue sequences and you have visual effect, you have visual suspense, pieces. So, set pieces. So as I said, you usually have 4 or 5 visual suspense pieces, and that's all camera and angles and cutting and your coverage. And that's terribly important. When you get into acting or dialogue scenes, it's really about the performances, because the way you shoot it, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack, I don't know. The way you shoot, if you start with your master, a very simple film lesson for $1.95, no, for free. You start with the master because you want to put it on its feet and see if it works. And if you get in any kind of trouble in your coverage, you can always go to the master. So you shoot the entire thing, the entire scene from with your master. And then you go in for your coverage, and your coverage in dialogue scenes is almost always the same. It's overs. Well, it may be a tighter two, but it's overs, it's singles, and it's inserts. That's your basic, cutting pattern for dialogue. So really, that doesn't take a genius to do. You can do moving masters. You can do what Birdman, I can never pronounce the guy's name.
Iñárritu or something.
Yeah, whatever. You can do. You can do.
I have the worst enunciation of anyone on the show, though.
Yeah,
Don't ask me.
Well, that goes back to the police, the cop drama in the 80s that became so hot for a period. Where you have
Cop rock. I'm kidding. It wasn't cop rock.
No, it was before that.
Yes.
But you'd have
Smoke or
Hill
whatever.
Street Blues.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, Hill Street Blues.
Cop drama 80s. I got you covered. I watched them.
But you saw it in West Wing too. Well, I mean, and you see it in so much, and it's what that guy does. But you take your Steadicam and you follow him. And your Steadicam is a single, turns into a 2. Somebody goes on, somebody else comes in. But I mean, so those and your masters and your overs and your singles are that's what you can't do a lot with dialogue scenes. The real talent comes in your visual suspense sequences or your action sequences. So
how it all comes together.
Well, I mean, yes, but action doesn't take the talent that a suspense sequence does. Ergo, 5 million and one action movies. You just shoot the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Get an Asian stunt coordinator in, and he can do it for you. And, it used to be at least you had to physically orient people. Now you don't even have to do that. You just have a ton of cuts. So your real talent is with acting, it's subtext. It's what they don't say. It's what's going on underneath the scene is what you're looking for. If there's any depth to the writing. And with suspense sequences, that takes a delicate hand to build those, and so into the action payoffs.
We used to have that term "fix it in post," and now it's "make it in post."
Yeah,
it used to be like, "Oh, we can fix that one thing." Now people are literally, we can make a whole movie in post."
Yeah, but that's not true.
Yeah, they'll try though.
But I mean, if you really have to, you can see it. You really have to know what you're doing and what you want to do. What a visual metaphor is that supports the theme. It has to have a theme. Your characters all have to want something, and they have to be either getting closer to it or getting farther away from it. And if there's any kind of sexual attraction in it, there's all of that. You have to have a life. Yes, so yes, in dialogue scenes, it's about the performance, And otherwise, it's about how you cut it and your coverage to get there. And I storyboard and so on. But that you could go into Hitchcock and and he'd have the whole goddamn film up on storyboards all around the room.
Yeah, and I mean, just watching his stuff to this day is still educational.
It was planned, everything.
Yeah. Steve Johnson wants to know, and I think I know the answer to this.
Is this Steve Johnson, the effects guy?
Not the effects guy that worked with you on Fright Night. No, a different Steve Johnson. Was Brad Dourif always your first choice for Child's Play for Charles Lee Ray?
Yes.
And that was because?
Because I had worked with him. He played the bad guy in a movie that nobody remembers, which I thought was pretty good, called Fatal Beauty with Whoopi Goldberg.
Hey.
I have never seen that film.
I have never seen it either.
It's a comedy?
It's in between.
Well, it's an action ripoff of Beverly Hills Cop.
With Whoopi Goldberg.
Wow. Did you write it or just direct it?
No, I just directed it.
Huh.
Right after Fright Night.
Right.
That was your movie after
I tried
Fright Night,
that
but before
because
that.
everybody said I had to go straight and get into the mainstream.
Oh.
Disaster. but Whoopi's very good, and I think the film is a lot of fun. And the action sequences certainly work. I get criticized for being too violent, and that's when I knew I was in the wrong place.
I got the VHS. So
Okay, yeah, we're watching that.
Okay.
Well, I really wanted to do John Woo before John Woo, but nobody would let me.
And there's not enough pigeons for that. Not enough pigeons in the world for that kind of play.
I do have one shot in there with pigeons flying up,
Slow motion.
No, not in slow motion, but flying up.
That's funny.
Off a rooftop.
I'm going to close with Amanda Oakes, one of our fine listeners.
She's a regular.
Two-parter. In terms of the main actors in Fright Night, I mean, everyone in that movie was pretty spot on in terms of what you wrote. Was there something you saw in each of their auditions that won them the role? I'm just going to guess that they were exactly what you were looking for. There's some great stories. Mm-hmm. Charlie Sheen came in to read, and I made one of the bigger mistakes of my life. I wouldn't have cast him because he wasn't he just was too handsome.
Mm-hmm.
But Charlie Brewster?
Yeah.
Wow.
But he's not innocent.
No, Charlie Sheen back then was gorgeous.
But he's never stopped talking about how I wouldn't let him read. I told him that he was a leading man. He wasn't the kid next door. And he went around for years telling everybody that I wouldn't let him read. And I always felt bad that I didn't let him read. Because I'm sure he would have knocked it out, but he was stunningly gorgeous. He was really a terrific looking guy.
Got that square jaw. Yeah, he was gorgeous.
Well, but he was a baby then too. He was young. So that's one. The Roddy McDowell came in, and I already knew he could do it. And we took the image of the Cowardly Lion for Peter Vincent.
Yeah, that's great. That
beautifully
totally makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The second part of her questions is that she loved the Twisted Tales that you did.
Thank you. Well,
any chance for more?
I wish if we ever get it going again, a big tip of the hat to William Forsythe.
Yes,
because William Forsythe. I mean, I've been so lucky to work with so many terrific actors. Chris Sarandon. I mean, William.
I think some of Sarandon's best work is in your two movies, Child's Play and Fright Night. And you did a third one with him, right? What was it?
I did a movie of the week that got Ricky Schroeder a Golden Globe nomination called The Stranger Within.
That's what it was.
Kate Jackson and
Sarandon.
No, Chris Sarandon was in it, but the real talent in that was Silver Spoons.
Ricky Schroeder.
Ricky Schroeder.
Yeah.
And Ricky is just that's...
Yeah, 7-me-year-old still swoons whenever you mention his name.
Well, I mean, but he's an underutilized resource. I mean,
he did a war TV show. I can't even.
He ended up doing NYPD Blue.
Oh yeah.
Years later.
There was something he played a soldier in recently when I remember the name, I'm going to kick myself. But he was really good in it. Now I have to Google that.
Well, I had him playing a kid who comes back and claims that he's his mother's lost son. And then, of course, he ends up coming on to his mother. And it had wonderful darkness to it. And having that come from little innocent Ricky Schroeder, who then was Rick Schroeder, he was just terrific, terrific actor. And I think because Roddy McDowell used to say the hardest thing he'd ever done, and he spent his entire life doing it, was overcome having been a successful child actor.
Right.
And I think that was true of Rick Schroeder too.
Yeah.
That people don't realize how strong he is as an adult actor.
It wasn't recent. It was Lost Battalion, but it was great.
Okay. Well, he's a. Anyway, I've worked with just some of them I haven't liked so much, but generally speaking, I've worked with just wonderful players. I've been blessed, but also I chose them. And I think that comes from the years of working in the actor's studio, and having. I feel like I spent my life in scene study class. I spent so many years in acting class.
Well, now you can add podcasts.
Yes.
Now I can add podcasts.
You can add podcasts to that long list.
I thank the audience out there for listening. If you're still listening. And I thank all of you. I thank all of you for being so wonderful.
For joining us.
Of course.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for coming in.
Tom's been a long supporter of Jump Cut and other things, in which people don't need to because they have lots of options. But Tom and Mick, who both live nearby, not to tell you where.
Go in all the time. Go to the Jump Cut Cafe.
He's been very supportive. So
and we've got some cool stuff coming up next week.
No, we don't. Not yet.
Oh, wait, not yet. I'm sorry. That's the week after I'm excited about. Next week, we're working on next week. It's going to kick ass either way.
President's coming in. That's all that matters.
Yeah, 2 weeks from now, Larry Fissenden will be on a long
with Glenn McQuaid.
And I'm excited about Glenn as well because I love both those guys. They're like my New York buds.
So start watching their movies now and prep.
Yes.
All right.
And I believe that, the only thing I want to plug is the 12 hours thing. It's in a couple weeks, but I want to let people, if you live in LA, we're going to have 12 hours of 16 millimeter shorts, horror films, features, all day long, noon to midnight. It's free, and we won't release the titles, but there's some really interesting stuff in there. Some stuff that a lot of people may not have seen as well, a couple films.
When is it again?
It is on the 26th.
October 26th at Jump Cut.
Yep, on Sunday, all day. It will be, Mike will be projecting for 12 hours.
Me
and him will be on our feet most of the day, probably.
I came last year. It was fun.
And last year was smaller.
I brought my daughter last year.
But I think it could, the first couple will be a little kids-friendly. There'll be a couple shorts, but then it will get horror pretty quick. And there's a couple and there's a great anthology that I've never seen on screen. I'm really excited about it. So, some good stuff.
I will plug Screamfest because on Wednesday at Screamfest, I am going to be doing the moderating for Fear Clinic, which is Rob Hall's new film. He's
based on the show that was on FEARnet?
Yes. Yeah. And so it's his movie version of it. And
is Daniel Harris still in it?
No. Don't think so,
She's
but Robert Englund is.
Yes.
And so I'm going to be doing the Q&A and moderation for that. So come by, say hi. It should be a fun show.
I think, now that you mentioned it, I did something called Twisted Tales, which was on FearNet before FearNet crashed and burned. You can get it on.
Thanks for reminding me.
Yes, you can get it on DVD on Amazon. Tom Holland's Twisted Tales.
Yep.
And some terrific actors on that, including Danielle Harris.
Yeah. We gave that lots of press on Fango. We loved that.
And is it true that you worked with one Alfred J. Bowen?
I was going to say AJ.
He said his real name. Oh my God!
Inside the actor studio, we always talk about Alfred J. Bowen.
Well, I'm doing something else too. I mean, I had I got to get Tim Sullivan. And we put up.
Who is also always in Jump Cut.
Really? I've never seen him.
I've talked to him there
Tim
before.
Sullivan, you're thinking of the wrong person.
No, Tim Sullivan. I've had conversations with him.
He lives in Santa Monica.
The Werebear guy?
The Werebear guy. He's a redhead.
I've never seen him.
Okay.
Yeah.
We put up...
Why is Bekah lying?
We put up...
I swear, I've had conversations with him and Tom Holland in Jump Cut at the same time.
We put up Fright Night at, on the limited edition, enhanced collector's edition.
Oh, right, with the autographs and the stuff like that.
And because I had some of those that I got from Nick Redman. Because I autographed for him, and there was a real interest, and we're going to try to do the same with Child's Play for Christmas, and an enhanced collector's limited edition.
Yeah.
So you can look for that too.
Yeah, and they're usually on eBay or.
I think we're gonna put them up on our own website.
Okay.
But I mean that's limited edition again.
Yeah, it's not just in like the autographed disc. It's like Tim has put together like almost like a collector's package where it's like an original 8x10 from the movie, along with like a certificate of authenticity and autographs and stuff like that. So keep a look out for that. We'll post about it too. Because there's a niche where they don't really give the behind. They don't do a classy job with behind the scenes.
And there's so much more that could be done for those who are really collecting. And I understand that, and and I like that stuff myself.
Right.
So
All right.
Well,
thank
we're
you.
and excited. Hopefully, the Stephen King thing all goes well, and we'll be seeing a new movie.
And hopefully, maybe someday MGM will give me the rights to
Beast
The
Within.
Beast Within.
If you're listening, MGM,
Yeah.
For that
get on top
matter,
of that.
maybe I don't know who has the rights to Fright Night now. Maybe they'll give me the rights so I can make one of those and continue the story.
Yes. Or at least a comic book. Yes, I'm still voting for. All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
thanks, Tom.